Chapter 634. Under Emosher's guidance, the 40-plus dragon warriors quickly broke through. Moreover, Emosher's guidance this time used the time skill. Apart from the first double Feng, the rest of the dragon warriors basically compressed their time. What was supposed to be 5 minutes was actually just a few seconds. After breaking through, the dragon warriors cupped their fists towards Emosher and knelt on one knee. "We will never forget Teacher Mo's great kindness. We will never forget Teacher Mo's great kindness," the dragon warriors said gratefully. Some of them had broken through 2 ranks, while others had broken through 4 ranks. If not for Emosher, they probably wouldn't even be able to break through 1 rank. In this lifetime he would die at his current level. Moreover, the significance of Emosher helping them break through was not only an increase in their strength, but also an extension of their lifespan. They were all evolved dragons. Every time they advanced a rank, their lifespan would be extended by 1,000 years. In other words, Emosher only used a few seconds to extend each of their lifespan by at least 2,000 years. Such a great kindness naturally made them excited and moved. One of the evolved dragons said, "Teacher Emo, if you have any use for us in the future, please don't hesitate to ask." The rest of the dragons nodded. Emosher waved his hand and said, "Brothers, you have been fighting day and night on the Eastern Front, using your lives to protect our safety. It's my honor to be able to do something for you. How could I dare to ask for anything in return?" This made the dragon warriors have a deeper understanding of Emosher. At the same time, they admired Emosher even more in their hearts. They originally thought that this teacher who could help them break through 2 ranks in a short time was a senior expert who would be high and mighty. They didn't expect this senior expert to treat them like this. It must be known that in today's society, although they were fighting on the front lines every day, not many dragons respected them. Because with the development of society, the dragons had become more materialistic and more materialistic. The dragons no longer worshipped heroes but those rich bosses. And now, this archmage was treating them with such respect. How could they not be moved? Emosher waved his hand and said, "It's already late. It's getting late. Everyone go back and rest. If you want, you can stay here for another 3 to 5 days before returning to the Eastern Front." The soldiers cupped their fists towards Emosher. "Thank you, Teacher Emo." That night, Shuangfeng was cultivating in his tent. Liaoshan returned from outside. He opened Shuangfeng's tent and glanced inside. Seeing that Shuangfeng was still cultivating, he couldn't help but shake his head. "I say, Shuangfeng, don't you find it boring? Look at this colorful world, it's so much better than our boring Eastern Front. It's not easy to come here, don't you know how to go out and have some fun?" However, just as he said this, he suddenly froze. This was because he could sense from Shuangfeng's cultivation that there was something wrong with Shuangfeng's aura. It seemed to be many times stronger than before. He carefully sensed it again and asked in surprise, "Shuangfeng, you've broken through?" After both of them had completed 81 cycles of cultivation, they slowly opened their eyes. I've broken through." Liaoshan was stunned again. "But that's not right. You were only a rank 2 super evolved dragon before. Even if you broke through, you'd only be rank 3. I'm rank 4. Why does your aura seem to be stronger than mine now?" Shuangfeng shook his head and replied in embarrassment, "No, I'm rank 5 now." "What?" Liaoshan shook his head repeatedly. He couldn't believe it, or rather he didn't want to believe it. When he went out this morning, this guy was only a rank 2 super evolved dragon. When he came back at night, he was rank 5. In less than 12 hours he broke through to rank 3? However, judging from Shuangfeng's aura, he was indeed more than 10 times stronger than himself, a rank 4. Thinking about how this idiot Shuangfeng usually didn't know how to deceive people, he must be telling the truth. However, this guy broke through 3 levels consecutively. What's there to be ashamed of? This made Liaoshan even more shocked. *CK Shuangfeng, even a blockhead like you can be enlightened one day. Tell me, how did you break through? Shuangfeng smiled and shook his head. If I were to cultivate by myself, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to break through even if I died. It was Teacher Emo who helped me. Magus? Which Magus? Liaoshan was a little confused. Previously he didn't pay much attention to Emosher. He had only met him once 10 days ago. At that time he only knew that he was a teacher and didn't pay attention to his surname. In the past 10 days he had been indulging in wine and women. He had long forgotten about this so-called teacher. It's the Teacher Emo who taught us the multiplication table. Shuangfeng, are you sure you're not joking? Liaoshan still felt that Shuangfeng was joking. That bastard teacher? Shuangfeng, you're playing with me. Liaoshan knew that Shuangfeng never lied. However, he couldn't believe it. He didn't want to believe it. What he didn't want to believe wasn't that Shuang Feng had broken through 3 levels under that teacher's guidance. It was that he didn't want to believe that he had missed a great opportunity. Shuang Feng naturally didn't know what he was thinking. Instead, he said seriously, "No, it was Instructor Mo who guided me. He first let me practice it once, then guided me to practice it once. Then I broke through. Moreover, I only broke through 3 ranks." At this point, Shuang Feng lowered his head in shame. Brother Jin broke through to the 4th level. Shuang Feng felt a little dizzy when he heard this. He kept shaking his head. "No, I don't believe it. How can someone break through to the 4th level consecutively? This is definitely fake. That teacher is just playing a trick on you." At this moment, another warrior walked in. "Shuang Feng, has your cultivation stabilized? I broke through to the 3rd level and just stabilized my cultivation. Speaking of which, that Brother Jin is really a ruthless person. He broke through to the 4th level consecutively and stabilized his cultivation long ago. It seems that our talent is still lacking compared to his." When Li Aoshan heard this, he felt his vision go dark. At the same time, there were nearly 1,000 other people who felt the same way. The entire camp was practically boiling. After hearing about the experiences of these 40 warriors, they were all filled with regret. Teacher Mo is a truly capable dragon. We were simply too stupid. We missed a great opportunity. Fortunately, we are still in Cloud Sea City. Early tomorrow morning, we will go beg Teacher Mo and apologize to him. These dragons naively thought that Mo sure would give them a chance. This was because they heard from the 40 warriors that Teacher Mo was a very nice person. Not only did he help them break through, but he also didn't take a single cent. In particular, he was very respectful to the dragon warriors. Therefore, at 6 o'clock the next morning, these 1,000 people had already gathered together and headed to Mo Shi's residence. Lakeside Villa. Chapter 635. The next day was a Sunday. Early in the morning, Mo Shi had yet to wake up. The 1,000 dragon warriors had already gathered at the plaza outside Mo Shi's lakeside villa. However, in order not to offend Mo Shi, they did not approach Mo Shi's villa. Instead, they sent a clever dragon warrior to ask around in front of Mo Shi's villa. The dragon warrior was called Shui Wugen. When he arrived at the villa's entrance, he saw a young man practicing his skills by the lakeside. He could not help but feel happy as he approached the young man. "May I ask if you know Teacher Mo?" The young man was naturally Lei Ren. He sized the guy up and down. He did not look like a student who was here to learn. He asked with some doubt, "Why are you looking for Teacher Mo?" Shui Wugen was also a smart person. He could tell at a glance that Lei Ren and Teacher Mo's relationship was not shallow. Thus he greeted him with a warm smile. "Hello, we are dragon warriors from the Eastern Front. We are here to cultivate under Teacher Mo's orders." Lei Ren had heard a little about them. His face immediately turned cold and he shook his head. "What do you take Teacher Mo for? Do you know how many people on Cloud Sea Planet are begging Teacher Mo to take them as his disciples? How many people have brought gifts to ask Teacher Mo to be their master? Now Teacher Mo is kind enough to teach you for free without taking a single cent. In the end, you don't even appreciate it. Don't worry, Teacher Mo will not give you a second chance." When Shui Wugen heard this, his heart sank. However, he did not give up. That was a chance to advance to rank 2 or even rank 4. He could live for 2,000 or even 4,000 years. How could he give up just like that? He still greeted Lei Ren with a smile. "Previously we were blind. We are not good people. Now we know we were wrong." Lei Ren sneered. "Some mistakes can only be made once in a lifetime. There is no second chance." Shui Wugen still had a humble smile on his face. "Brother, please make an exception and inform Teacher Mo. Even if he refuses, we want to hear it from Teacher Mo himself." Lei Ren snorted. "Teacher Mo is busy every day. He works until midnight. He still hasn't woken up." In truth, Mo Shi had indeed only gone to bed in the middle of the night, but he had been busy with Happy for half the night. Of course, with his current strength, even if he was tossed and turned in the middle of the night, he would still be energetic if he wanted to wake up early. However, what was the point of waking up early? He could not think of a reason to wake up early. Shui Wugen cupped his fists towards Lei Ren. "Many thanks, brother. In that case, we will wait for Teacher Mo to wake up." Therefore, Shui Wugen retreated and returned to the plaza. The soldiers in the square couldn't wait any longer. "How is it? Have you seen Mentor Mo? Did Instructor Mo agree? I heard that this Teacher Mo is a very good person. You won't disagree, right?" Shui Wugen frowned and shook his head slightly. "Teacher Mo hasn't woken up yet. However, that person should be his disciple. From his attitude, it seems that Teacher Emo isn't too happy. The other giant dragons looked at each other, and one of them said in relief, "As the saying goes, it's easy to get rid of the king of hell, but it's hard to deal with the little demons. Some fellows just rely on their master's power to show off. Let's see Mentor Emo first. Then we'll wait here for Teacher Emo to wake up." If the soldiers at the front line saw the current performance of these people, they would be shocked. One must know that many of these soldiers had very fiery tempers. They would often attack at the slightest disagreement. Now that they had suffered such humiliation in front of Teacher Emo, not only did they not have the slightest intention of retaliating, they even looked very humble. When it was around noon, Emosher finally woke up. After eating the breakfast that Lei Rin sent over, Emosher poured himself a cup of tea and went to the lakeside. He enjoyed the beautiful scenery of the lakeside while drinking his tea. "Brother Emo, have you seen those giant dragon warriors? They came early in the morning intending to apologize to you." Although Lei Rin didn't like the attitude of these giant dragon warriors towards Emosher, whether or not to teach them still depended on Emosher's opinion. He couldn't make the decision for Emosher. Emosher didn't even look at those giant dragon warriors. He drank a mouthful of tea and said, "Today's tea is not bad." His meaning was very clear. There was no need to bother about them. Lei Rin immediately nodded. "Brother Emo, do you have any plans for today?" Emosher laughed. "Even if there is, it is my plan. As for you, you should cultivate well, young man." Although Lei Rin couldn't go with Emosher, he still nodded, "And big brother Emo, I'll listen to you." Then, he entered the courtyard and returned to his room to cultivate. This was completely different from his previous image as a hedonistic son. In the past, Lei Rin couldn't sit still after cultivating for 3 to 5 minutes. But ever since he met Emosher, he would cultivate for at least 5 hours a day. He would even cultivate for 2 to 3 days at a time. From afar, Shui Wugen saw Emosher come out. At the same time, he saw the person talking to Emosher. He knew that Lei Rin had already told Emosher about their situation. And Emosher didn't even glance in their direction. This was enough to show Emosher's attitude. Thinking of this, Shui Wugen's heart sank. But even so, he couldn't give up. He still called over 10 smarter warriors to come to the lakeside villa with him. They came to Emosher and knelt down on one knee in front of Emosher. "Mentor Emo, we were blind. Please forgive us. Mentor Emo, we offended you previously. If you want to punish us, we will accept it. Mentor Emo, we were wrong. We were so wrong. Now we know that we were wrong. Mentor Emo, I memorized the multiplication table last night. Please enlighten me." However, Emosher didn't pay any attention to them from beginning to end. "What a joke. A few days ago I took the initiative to teach you, but you treated my things like dog shit. Now, seeing that the 40+ giant dragons had improved, they pounced on me again." Emosher hated such snobbish people the most. No matter what they said at the side, Emosher paid no attention to them. After he finished tasting the tea, he directly soared into the sky and flew towards the distance, quickly disappearing into the horizon. The dragon warriors looked at each other when they saw this. However, they didn't dare to show any dissatisfaction. After all, they were in the wrong first. Moreover, Mentor Emo could really help a giant dragon advance to 4th grade in just a few minutes. This was enough to show Mentor Mo's strength. Moreover, even the Star Lord respected Mentor Emo. It was obvious how powerful and influential Mentor Emo was. That was why they didn't dare to complain in front of Emosher. "What do we do now?" one of the dragon warriors asked. "Wait. We wait until we die. Yes, we won't leave until Mentor Emo agrees." Chapter 636. Emosher strolled around for an entire day. With his current ability, he could already reach 1% of the speed of light. He couldn't go anywhere. Within a day, he could travel through the entire Cloud Sea planet and hundreds of nearby planets. Actually, he didn't do anything serious for the day. He looked at the sea of clouds, enjoyed the volcanic eruptions, and witnessed a tsunami in the middle of the sea. Then he had a big meal on a floating island in the sea. Seeing that it was getting late, he returned to the lakeside villa. When he returned to the entrance of the lakeside villa, the nearly 1,000 dragon warriors were still in the square not far from the lakeside villa. It was obvious that they had been here the entire day without eating or drinking. When they saw Emosher coming from afar, they all stood up straight. When Emosher landed in front of the lakeside villa, Shui Wugen and the 9 clever dragon warriors all rushed over. "Instructor Emo, Instructor Emo. Instructor Emo, we know we were wrong. Instructor Emo, please give us one last chance." However, Emosher just snorted coldly. "I only give you one chance. After that, he ignored them and went straight into the lakeside villa. Shui Wugen and the dragon warriors looked at each other. What should we do? How about we wait until death? If my instructor doesn't agree, we won't leave. A dragon warrior suggested. The other dragon warriors all nodded. Then they returned to the square and continued to stand up straight. One had to admit that they were indeed very persistent. They stood there for the entire night. At noon the next day, when Emosher woke up, they were still standing in the square. However, Emosher still ignored them. They stood in the square for the entire day. This night they still stood straight for the entire night. Due to the long lifespan of dragon warriors, there were many legends about perseverance in dragon culture. As long as you persevered, it seemed that there was nothing you couldn't do. If one day wasn't enough, then 10 days. If 10 days weren't enough, then a year. If 1 year wasn't enough, then 100 years or 1,000 years. There would always be a time when you could do it. The next morning, they were prepared to continue standing there and waiting for Emosher. They believed that their perseverance would eventually move him. However, this morning, Star-Lord Kong Hai ordered the 1,000 soldiers to return to the Eastern Front as soon as possible and replace them with the next batch of soldiers. As a result, these soldiers were completely out of luck with this opportunity. They were all extremely dejected. The next afternoon, when they returned to the Eastern Front, the general of the Eastern Front summoned them for questioning. Why exactly did the Star-Lord send them to Ocean of Cloud City? When he asked this question, the Eastern Front's general was surprised to discover that over 40 dragon warriors had grown stronger. At the very least, they had reached Tier 2, with some even reaching Tier 4. As for the rest of the soldiers, their strength did not increase. After asking the general of the Eastern Front, they understood what had happened. He immediately scolded the soldiers who failed to seize this opportunity. He could have used this opportunity to increase his strength. In the end, these guys missed such an opportunity. Not only did they fail to improve their own strength, but the strength of the Eastern Front also failed to improve because of them. What a bunch of idiots. Then the general of the Eastern Front ordered that the soldiers be locked up for half a month, and deduct half a year's worth of dragon coins from them. This was a warning to the rest of the warriors. The next morning he sent out the second batch of soldiers. The general of the Eastern Front did not discount this second batch of soldiers. Instead, he sent out 5,000 soldiers. Moreover, these 5,000 soldiers were all elites that he had handpicked. Most of them were Tier 5 evolved dragons. These soldiers were all very excited. When they left, the general of the Eastern Front gathered them together and gave them a lecture. All 5,000 of you, listen up. Every one of you must advance by at least 1 grade when you return. If you can't, you will be executed in public. His words were very strict. The soldiers were all shocked. However, since Instructor Emo had the ability to improve the strength of the other dragons, they would naturally advance by 1 grade as long as they did as Instructor Emo said. In just 1 short month, Emo sure had helped 15,000 soldiers advance by at least 1 grade. Moreover, the ones with the lowest potential had advanced by 1 grade. Most of them had advanced by 2 or even 3 grades. The one with the highest potential had advanced by 5 grades. He had gone from a Tier 5 evolved dragon to a Tier 10 evolved dragon. This was a terrifying improvement. On this day, a scout from the front lines came to report. General, bad news. The border city has fallen. The border city was a small city at the very front of the Eastern Front. As a matter of fact, this small city had no strategic significance. However, as the soldiers of the Eastern Front, they kept in mind the ancient motto, territory is sacred and inviolable. Those Hulong had occupied the border city. Naturally, they had to take it back. The general of the Eastern Front raised his eyebrows slightly. How many Hulong have come? About 100,000 of them. The general of the Eastern Front said without any hesitation, let those 15,000 soldiers deal with the 100,000 Hulong. The counselor next to him was a little worried. General, there are 100,000 Hulong. I don't think it's appropriate for us to only send 15,000 soldiers. Generally speaking, the strength of the dragon warriors was stronger than Hulong, but not by this much. 10,000 warriors could resist 15,000 Hulong at most. Now, they were only sending 15,000 to deal with 100,000 Hulong. No wonder he was worried. However, the general of the Eastern Front shook his head. This is the only way to show the might of our Eastern Front army. Also, they only sent 100,000 people and dared to occupy our border city. Obviously, they have other plans. If too many of us leave here and the city is empty, can you guarantee that they won't take advantage of the situation and invade? The counselor nodded. General, you have foresight. I admire you. In the afternoon of the same day, the 15,000 soldiers left for the border city. At the same time, the 100,000 Hulong around and in the center of the border city were singing and dancing to their heart's content. A spy came to report, "Boss, it's bad. The Eastern Front Army is here." The leader of the Hulong was a bearded man. Hearing the spy's report, he put down the wine cup in his hand and asked, "How many of them are here?" The spy replied, "Estimated to be around 15,000. The boss was a little stunned and then he burst out laughing. "They look down on us too much. They want to fight against 100,000 Hulong with only 15,000 soldiers? That's too childish. In this case, let's let them have a taste of our Hulong's power." Someone next to him said, "Boss, do they have any plans?" The bearded man waved his hand. "Even if they do, so what? Our mission this time is to lure them here. Our other brothers can take advantage of the situation and directly attack their general's mansion. This time we'll make them suffer a great loss and even kill their general directly." Hearing this, the crowd raised their weapons and roared angrily, "Kill the general and spread the glory of our long way. Kill the general and spread the glory of our long way. Kill the general and spread the glory of our long way." Chapter 637. When the 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front Army were 5 kilometers away from the border city, the 100,000 Hurons were already in position. In the past, whenever the Hurons encountered the Eastern Front Army, they would always split up and engage in guerrilla warfare. This time, however, they were preparing to fight the Eastern Front Army. This was very unusual. The captain of the 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front Army shouted at the Hurons from afar, "The Eastern Front Army is here. Why don't you surrender now? If you don't surrender, it will be too late for regrets." The bearded leader of the Hurons laughed. "So what if the Eastern Front Army is here? What's there to be afraid of? 15,000 soldiers coming to attack our 100,000 giant dragons. Aren't they just sending themselves to their deaths?" The captain of the Eastern Front Army sneered, "Since you don't want to listen, then die." Then he waved his flag and the 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front Army charged forward. When they charged over, they all transformed into their giant dragon forms. Each of the 15,000 giant dragons was 1,000 meters long. The sky was instantly filled with them. It was a spectacular scene. The 100,000 giant dragons thought that the Eastern Front Army had sent only 15,000 giant dragons over for some reason. There might even be an ambush in the dark, so they were already prepared. However, after some investigation, they found no ambush within a radius of tens of kilometers. This surprised the Hurons. Did the Eastern Front Army think that their 15,000 giant dragons could fight the 100,000 giant dragons? Apart from being surprised, the bearded man's eyes were filled with viciousness. Since they wanted to give their heads to him, it would be impolite to refuse. He then raised his right hand, intending to order the Hurons to attack. However, at this moment he paused for a moment. Strange. He felt that the strength of the Eastern Front Army seemed to have increased. The aura of the captain of the Eastern Front Army was no longer that of a 5th grade evolved giant dragon. He sensed it carefully and found that he couldn't tell what grade the captain's aura was. This meant that the captain was far more powerful than him. He was a 5th grade evolved giant dragon. That meant that the captain was most likely a 7th grade or even 8th grade evolved giant dragon. Thinking of this, he kept an eye out. He ordered the Hurons around him, set up the formation and act according to the situation. If you see something wrong, retreat immediately. The surrounding dragons felt a little strange. Why did Boss suddenly become a coward? Why would 100,000 Hulong cower in the face of 15,000 soldiers of the Eastern Front? This didn't seem like Boss's personality. At this moment, those from the Eastern Army had arrived. They were fearless in the face of 100,000 dragons. Their fangs and claws slashed at these Hulong. As soon as they attacked, the dragons felt that something was wrong. They had been fighting guerrilla warfare for hundreds of years, so they were very familiar with the Eastern Front Army. However, the strength displayed by these 15,000 Eastern Front Army was far greater than before. That was not all. The aura of the captain of the Eastern Front Army instantly spread out and enveloped them, causing the energy in their bodies to circulate very slowly. It was obvious that the strength of this Eastern Line captain had increased a lot in a short period of time. Previously he was only a rank 5 evolved giant dragon, but now his strength had most likely reached the rank 7 or even the rank 8. This made the dragons a little flustered. Just as they were panicking, the Eastern Front Army had already arrived, and the captain of the Eastern Front Army flew towards Hulong's boss. Seeing this, Hulong's boss hurriedly tried to escape. However, it was too late. The captain of the Eastern Front Army transformed into a giant dragon and lunged at Hulong's boss. Hulong's boss also transformed into a giant dragon, but he only had one goal: escape. That was because he could sense that this captain of the Eastern Front Army was not someone he could handle. However, it was too late. The captain of the Eastern Front Army stabbed his front claws into Hulong's back. He exerted some force and tore Hulong's body into two halves. Instant kill. As a result, the entire Hu Dragon army was thrown into chaos. All the Hu Dragons were in disbelief. Their boss had been dealing with the Eastern Front Army for many years. Both sides knew each other very well. They were both rank 5 evolved giant dragons. How could this captain of the Eastern Front Army kill their boss in an instant? Since their boss was already dead, they only had one choice: escape. The Hu Dragons had been fighting guerrilla warfare all this time and lacked the ability to fight large-scale battles. If they had fought together in such a situation, they might have had a chance of winning. However, they scattered and fled and could only be hunted down by the Eastern Front Army. In this final battle, the Eastern Front Army had killed over 2,000 of the Hu Dragons out of 15,000 of them. It was a pity that these Hulong were very cunning. Many of them had space attribute escape methods, so most of them were taken away by the Hulong. However, killing 2,000 of them was already the greatest victory they had achieved over the years. Over the years, the Hu Dragons had split up and attacked everywhere. Even in the battles where the Eastern Front Army won, they had only killed 100 Hu Dragons at most. A battle where 2,000 Hu Dragons were killed had never happened before. Moreover, it was very difficult to obtain escape methods with spatial attributes, especially for these Hulong. They did not dare to trade openly in the market. Therefore, it was even more difficult for them to get their hands on such things. Now that they had used up their spatial escape techniques, they would not be able to escape the next time they ran into them. Therefore, these Hu Dragons would stop for a while, and the Eastern Front Army would be able to enjoy some peace. The general of the Eastern Front Army saw the results of this battle from the central control room. He was very satisfied. Only 15,000 of the Eastern Front Army had defeated 100,000 Hu Dragons. This was indeed a great reputation for the Eastern Front Army. It made those Hu Dragons fearful, and at the same time, it foiled their conspiracy. That Mentor Mo was indeed powerful. It seemed that if he had the chance to return to Cloud Sea City in the future, he would have to pay a visit to Mentor Mo in person and express his gratitude. At the same time, in the lakeside villa, Mo Shur, who was tasting tea, suddenly heard a series of notifications in his mind. Dragon slaying value +1. Dragon slaying value +1. Dragon slaying value +1. When the notifications ended, Mo Shur looked at his dragon slaying value again. Dragon slaying value 203110000. You can level up. Do you want to level up now? Mo Shur was secretly delighted. This was really a case of leveling up while he was sitting at home. He had leveled up while he was tasting tea here. Well, this could work. Level up. Mo Shur said in his mind. Soon, a notification came in Mo Shur's mind. Level up successful. At this time he looked at his attributes again. Name, Mo Shur. Level, Tier 1 Magician, Tier 8 Super Evolved Dragon. Ability. Click to expand. Phew, Mo Shur let out a long breath. Becoming a Tier 8 Super Evolved Dragon meant that he was one step closer to becoming an Ancient Dragon. As long as he became an Ancient Dragon, he would be able to do whatever he wanted. He had been keeping a low profile since coming to the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. He had been holding it in for a long time. Chapter 638. Since the Eastern Front Army had killed over 2,000 Hu Dragons, the Hu Dragons were much more restrained in the following days, and the Eastern Front was much more peaceful. Of course, the peace on the Eastern Front was not a good thing for Mo Shur. The more peaceful the Eastern Front was, the less dragon killing points he had. But even so, the Eastern Front Army still sent 5,000 dragons to Cloud Sea City to learn from Mo Shur every 10 days. Mo Shur still taught them the multiplication table before helping them break through. Gradually, the number of Mo Shur students increased by the system. After more than 2 months, his students had already reached more than 30,000 people. At this time, Mo Shur hoped that a war would break out somewhere so that he could instantly level up. However, the entire Cloud Sea planet had been relatively peaceful recently, and there was no war at all. The Cloud Sea planet and the other planets also lived in harmony, and there were no wars. This made Mo Shur speechless. He could only walk around aimlessly every day. He looked very relaxed, but no one knew the helplessness in his heart. On this day, Mo Shur was teaching students at the academy. A spaceship slowly descended above the Cloud Sea Academy. When the instructors of Ocean of Clouds Academy saw the symbol on the flying ship clearly, all of their expressions changed slightly. There was a dark green skull symbol on the spaceship. It looked a little strange and a little terrifying. This is a spaceship from the Myriad Poison Planet. The Myriad Poison Planet was notorious in the nearby star fields. There was poison everywhere on the Myriad Poison Planet. Plants were poisonous, animals were poisonous, microbes were poisonous, and even the air was poisonous. It was very difficult for ordinary dragons to survive on the Myriad Poison Planet, but for poison-type dragons, it was a treasure trove. Their cultivation there was twice the result with half the effort. So many poison-type dragons would eventually go to the Myriad Poison Planet. If such a planet developed, its strength would far surpass other planets. But poison-type dragons were very rare. Out of 100 dragons, only one poison-type dragon would appear. So the number of poison-type dragons was a big problem. So it was very difficult for them to develop. But even so, no one dared to casually provoke the Myriad Poison Planet. The master of the Myriad Poison Planet was a rank 7 super evolved dragon. It was very difficult to find a rank 7 super evolved dragon in the nearby star fields. Moreover, it was a rank 7 super evolved giant dragon with the poison attribute. This made it even harder to deal with. If they provoked him, one of his big moves would probably cause millions of corpses to fall. Therefore, the planets in the nearby star fields had formed a consensus that it was best not to provoke the giant dragons of the Myriad Poison Star for no reason. Only 2 people came down from the aircraft. Both of them had dyed their hair dark green and wore dark green eyeshadow. It gave people a very strange feeling. One of them said, "Big brother, is this Cloud Sea planet? You didn't go the wrong way, did you? Are you kidding? How can I get lost? I heard that planet Cloud Sea is a very beautiful planet, but why does this place make me feel so King uncomfortable? Nonsense. The air you breathed on the Myriad Poison Planet was beneficial to your body. Here there's no poison in the air at all. It's only natural that you feel uncomfortable." That's true. What kind of lousy planet is this? It's really annoying. Let's hurry up and leave with that person. As the 2 of them spoke, they completely ignored the teachers and students around them. After they finished speaking, they waved at a student. The student didn't dare to step forward. Instead, it was a teacher who blocked the student's path. "May I ask why the 2 of you have come to our Cloud Sea planet?" One of them said, "Just one thing. Where's that teacher Mo? We want to take him away." His words were very domineering. It gave people the feeling that no one would dare to stop them. Although the teacher was displeased, he didn't dare to show it on his face. These fellows weren't like ordinary bad guys. They didn't show their emotions on their faces and they acted without any rules. They did everything according to their whims. If they weren't careful, they could easily poison a large number of people. The teacher said, "I still need to report this matter to the dean. Please follow me." "What dean?" "We want to find that teacher Mo right now. Take me to him immediately." The 2 of them were rank 3 super evolved giant dragons. They naturally didn't care about the dean of the Cloud Sea Academy. Moreover, their purpose in coming to Cloud Sea Planet was to take Emoshur away. They couldn't be bothered to deal with the dean. When the teacher heard this, he thought to himself, should he take them to see Emoshur? If he took them to see him, who knew where they would take teacher Emo and what they would do? If he didn't take them to see him, they might kill all the students in the academy in a fit of anger. Fortunately, at this moment, the dean appeared in time. The dean had naturally received the report that a flying ship from Myriad Poison Planet had appeared in the academy. He quickly rushed over and glanced at the 2 giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet. He cupped his fists and said, "Why have the 2 of you come to our Cloud Sea Academy?" The 2 men sized up the dean from head to toe. "Who are you?" "I'm the dean of the Cloud Sea Academy. You can tell me anything," the dean said with a smile on his face. However, the 2 of them waved their hands as if they were chasing a dog. Go away, go away. We're looking for teacher Emo. Everyone else, get out of my way." The dean's face darkened. After being the dean for so many years, this was the first time someone spoke to him like this. However, he couldn't lose his temper in the face of these 2 fellows who were covered in poison. Helpless, the dean could only say to the teacher, "Take them to teacher Emo." At the same time, he used his mind to send a voice transmission to Emoshur. 2 giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet are looking for you. Do you want to avoid them in advance? Emoshur replied indifferently, "Avoid what? Why should I avoid them? Let them come." The dean heard that Emoshur didn't panic at all. Instead, he seemed to have a card up his sleeve. Only then did he feel relieved. Soon the two of them were brought to Emosher by the teacher. At this moment, Emosher was watering the flowers at the door of his office. He was living a very leisurely life now. He was either tasting tea or watering flowers. In the eyes of the other giant dragons, he was as leisurely as a god. The two green-furred myriad poison star dragons looked Emosher up and down. One of them asked, "Your teacher Emo?" Emosher didn't look at them and continued watering the flowers. At the same time he replied indifferently, "That's right." The other myriad poison planet giant dragon shook his head. "He looks very ordinary. Who cares? Anyway, the Star Lord asked us to take him back. We just need to complete the mission. Then come with us." The two of them spoke as if they were talking to a criminal. And they didn't care about Emosher's feelings at all. Emosher chuckled. "If I go just because you ask me to, wouldn't I lose face?" The teacher who followed them couldn't help but change his expression slightly. He whispered to Emosher, "Teacher Emo and the others are giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet. Be careful." Chapter 639. When the two dragons saw that Emosher did not take their words seriously, they snorted coldly. "A mere teacher is a frog at the bottom of a well. He doesn't understand the power of our dragons." The other dragon waved his hand impatiently. "What's the point of talking so much with him? Just take him away." Seeing this, the dean hurriedly stood in front of Emosher. "The two of you can talk things out. If you really want to take Teacher Emo away, you should at least get our Star Lord's permission. After all, Teacher Emo is a member of our Cloud Sea planet, and is very important to us." However, before the dean could finish his words, his face suddenly turned green. This green color quickly spread from his face to his veins, forming dark green lines that looked like the veins of a leaf. The dean, a rank 2 super-evolved dragon, was poisoned in an instant. The other teacher was shocked and wanted to save the dean, but the dean took a step back and said hoarsely, "Don't touch me, there's poison." Only then did the teacher retract his hand. The giant dragon from the Myriad Poison Star didn't pay any attention to the dean and strode towards Emosher. "Teacher Emo, leave quickly, don't worry about us, leave quickly." The dean knew that Emosher had spatial abilities. If he wanted to escape, no one could stop him. Hearing this, the dragon of the Myriad Poison Star chuckled. "The space within 100 kilometers has already been locked by our space lock chains. None of you can escape." Then he placed his right hand on Emosher's shoulder. However, at that moment, bang! The Myriad Poison Star Dragon's body exploded into a bloody mist. There was no warning at all. Not only was the other Myriad Poison Star Dragon shocked, but even the dean and the others were shocked. Seeing this, the other Myriad Poison Star Dragon glared at Emosher fiercely. "You dare kill my Myriad Poison Star Dragon? Courting death." As he spoke, a dark green smoke quickly spread out from his body. As the smoke spread, the leaves around him withered and rotted. Even the ground under his feet was covered in a layer of black. Even the ground was rotting quickly. Have you ever seen animals rot, plants rot, and soil rot? But at this moment, as the smoke spread out from his body, the ground under his feet was rapidly rotting. From this, it could be seen how toxic the smoke was. However, at this moment, bang! Just like before, the poisonous giant dragon's body quickly exploded into a bloody mist. As his body exploded, the rotten ground finally stopped spreading. Although there was still some residual dark green smoke ahead, Emosher completely ignored it. He walked up to the principal. He reached out and patted the dean's shoulder. The dean quickly dodged and said, "Don't touch me. I've been poisoned." However, Emosher's hand was already on his shoulder. In the next moment, a warm energy entered his body and quickly spread through his 8 extraordinary meridians. As this energy spread, he felt as if he was being illuminated by the sun. His entire body felt warm. After a short 3 minutes, the black color on his face quickly faded. When Emosher withdrew the energy from his body, he no longer felt the cold sensation of being poisoned. "It's fine now," Emosher said. The dean looked at his hands and legs from head to toe. The instructor next to him also said in disbelief, "The dean is fine." The dean hurriedly cupped his fist to Emosher. "Instructor Emo, thank you. I can't repay you for saving my life." Emosher did not wait for him to finish and waved his hand. "Dean, we're all colleagues. There's no need to say anything unnecessary." The dean nodded but then said, "Instructor Emo, now that we've killed these two, if Myriad Poison Planet pursues the matter, we'll be in big trouble." Emosher shook his head. "Isn't it better if they pursue the matter? We can destroy Myriad Poison Planet while we're at it." The dean and the instructor looked at each other. Destroy Myriad Poison Planet while they're at it? Wasn't it too easy for him to say that? However, looking at Instructor Mo's strength, the two giant dragons from Myriad Poison Planet exploded into a bloody mist without even moving a finger. Even the dean, a rank 2 super evolved giant dragon, did not know how Emosure did it. However, in his heart, Emosure's status had risen by another level. He had thought that Emosure was only a 5th or 6th grade super evolved giant dragon. Now it seemed he was wrong. Very wrong. Let alone a 6th grade ultra evolved dragon, even a 10th grade ultra evolved dragon couldn't do what Emosure had just done. He didn't even need to lift a finger to kill 2 3rd grade ultra evolved dragons in an instant. When they thought of this, the two of them felt that Instructor Mo might actually be able to destroy Myriad Poison Planet while he was at it. How powerful was Instructor Mo? He was probably an ancient dragon at the very least. The two of them looked at each other again when they thought of the ancient dragon. Ancient dragons. They were existences that only existed in legends. They had not seen a single ancient dragon in the entire Cloud Sea planet, not including the entire Myriad Dragonstar region. Now there was an ancient dragon hiding in Cloud Sea Academy. It felt like a dream to them. Emosure did not think much of the two dragons after he killed them. In fact, he was even looking forward to it. Everyone from Myriad Poison Planet, come find me. The more people that came, the better. At the same time, on Myriad Poison Planet, Myriad Poison Planet's master, Du Qianhua, was with several women with perfect figures and perfect faces. They were admiring the beautiful scenery of Myriad Poison Planet. Myriad Poison Heart Poison was extremely poisonous, but one had to admit that the scenery here was indeed beautiful. Moreover, it was the most beautiful star among the hundreds of nearby star regions. At this moment, a giant dragon came to report, "Master, bad news." Du Qianhua frowned. "Can't you see that I'm busy?" Scram. The giant dragon's heart trembled and he hurriedly retreated. After another 2 hours, Du Qianhua had finished admiring the scenery and returned to his poison palace. The giant dragon came to report again, "Master, bad news. Du Pingji and Du Yueji's life sensors have turned black." There was a type of life sensor in the Myriad Dragonstar region. No matter how far away you were, it could sense your life. Normally, the life sensor would be green, indicating that the life was normal. However, when the target was injured, the life sensor would turn red. When the target died, the life sensor would turn black. When Du Qianhua heard this, his face sank. Why didn't you report when the life sensor turned red? If they had reported it at that time, they might have been able to save the two of them. The reporting giant dragon shook his head. It didn't change. It turned from green to black in an instant. When Du Qianhua heard this, he frowned. If it didn't turn red, it meant that the two of them had been killed in an instant without being injured. He slammed the table beside him. Preposterous, investigate. Chapter 640. Recently, Cloud Sea Planet seemed to be peaceful and uneventful. Star-Lord Kong Hai was a soldier, and after he took office he paid attention to strengthening the military. Coupled with the fact that Emosure had increased the military's combat strength, the Hu dragons didn't dare to attack everywhere. Therefore, the 4 seas were peaceful and peaceful. However, on this day no one noticed that over 10 scouts from Myriad Poison Planet had mixed in with the people who came to Cloud Sea Planet. Scouts were people who specially went to other planets to investigate everything about that planet. Or they would carry out some special missions on other planets. They would usually disguise themselves as tourists or merchants to travel between planets. They had all received a high degree of professional training, so it was very difficult for ordinary people to distinguish them. As soon as they arrived at Cloud Sea Star, they headed straight for Cloud Sea City. Because the 2 scouts had come to invite Emosure to Cloud Sea Planet, their mysterious deaths were definitely related to Cloud Sea City. It didn't take long for those scouts who disguised themselves as tourists to spread throughout the city. It had to be said that they were very good at gathering information. In just 5 days they had gathered enough information in the huge city. Even though the Star-Lord knew that Emosure had killed the 2 dragons of Cloud Sea Planet and had been emphasizing that it must be kept a secret, these scouts still used all sorts of methods. They were bribed or threatened, and they were always able to get the information they needed. In the end, not only did they manage to gather enough information, they even managed to obtain the video of Emosure killing the 2 talent scouts in seconds. Among the 10 scouts, the leader was called the Inspector. When the Inspector showed the video to the rest of the talent scouts, they were all horrified. He didn't even have to do anything to kill them? Could he be in existence even stronger than the Long Yenshur? the legendary Long Yan Shi? Many people think that the Long Yan Shi really exists. In fact, the Long Yan Shi is just a legend. There is no such thing as the Long Yan Shi in history. Once Dragon Sense reaches level 10, the Long Yan Shi won't be able to level up anymore. As for us giant dragons, our bodies are extremely tough. It would be child's play to think that you can kill a giant dragon with just your dragon will. Then what's going on? None of these talent scouts had any clue. Why don't we report this to the Star Master first and let him make a decision? This suggestion was unanimously approved by everyone, and the inspector made the final decision. Soon they reported the matter to the Star Master and sent the video. The Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet frowned slightly when he saw the video. Based on his experience, Emosher should have used some kind of spatial technique. The Space Attribute Giant Dragon had many unimaginable skills. For example, they could use space collapse. When the space collapsed, any creature in the space would instantly explode just like in the video. However, you wouldn't be able to see any signs of space collapsing from the outside because space was formless and formless. He only knew that Emosher had many attributes, but he didn't expect him to have the space attribute as well. In the end, the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet made up his mind, let Du Kong go. He must bring him back. Du Kong was a general under the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet. She was one of those rare dual attribute dragons. Not only did she have the poison attribute but she also had the space attribute. The combination of the poison attribute and the space attribute allowed her to be far more powerful than other dragons of the same grade. Under normal circumstances, a 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon like him could easily kill a 6th grade ultra-evolved dragon. That was why the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet was somewhat wary of Du Kong, even though he was a 6th grade ultra-evolved dragon. Du Kong was a female dragon with a seductive figure. She was one of those dragons who looked seductive but whose entire body was filled with poison. Even though she had many admirers on the Myriad Poison Planet, none of these admirers dared to pursue her. What a joke. Who would dare to touch a dragon covered in poison? Moreover, she was a 4th grade ultra-evolved dragon. Her power had already surpassed 99.9% of all dragons. Think about it. If you really became a couple with her. If someone else's girlfriend got angry, she would either ignore them or argue with them. If Du Kong got angry, she would silently poison you. This was going to cost him his life. Before Du Kong set off, the Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet warned him, your target is a dragon with many attributes. Moreover, he also has the space attribute. You must be careful. Du Kong smiled seductively, you must be joking, Star Lord. The most powerful innate talent in history only had 3 attributes. Do you think he has many attributes? The Star Lord of the Myriad Poison Planet nodded, of course. I also know that the most powerful innate talent in history only had 3 attributes. The reason he has so many attributes is very likely because he has used some sort of trick. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, poison, ice and space. He has shown all of these attributes before. Du Kong chuckled when he heard this. That only means he is lucky to be able to obtain skill items with these attributes. However, no matter how many skill items with these attributes he has, they are not his own attributes. So don't worry, Star Lord. Hehe. Du Kong smiled seductively at the end of his speech. Even the Star Lord Du Qianhua felt like he couldn't take it anymore. In truth, Du Qianhua had a bad impression of Du Kong since a long time ago. However, he was a very cautious person, including when it came to pursuing women. When he understood Du Kong, he dismissed the idea of pursuing him. Even though he was the Star Lord, he was not to be trifled with. If he provoked Du Kong, he might not even know how he died. Du Kong might only be a 4th grade super-evolved dragon, but if he used his unique attribute and the space attribute at the same time, it would be easy for him to kill a 6th grade poison dragon. Soon Du Kong left the Myriad Poison Planet. He blended into the tourists of the Cloud Sea Planet. As the most powerful talent scout on the Myriad Poison Planet, her disguise skills were also very strong. First, she tampered with her appearance. Her true appearance was simply too alluring. If she were to become a talent scout, she would attract too much attention. Thus, she first disguised herself as a very ordinary woman. He then arrived at the Cloud Sea Planet. After arriving at the Cloud Sea Planet, he went straight to the Cloud Sea City. After meeting up with the other talent scouts, he quickly found Emosher's residence. On this evening, Emosher was sitting on a rocking chair by the lake, slowly rocking. The setting sun spread across the surface of the lake, dyeing it crimson. The bamboo forest by the lake was also dyed crimson. In addition to the clouds and the sky being dyed pink, It was as if the entire world had been dyed crimson. A crimson woman slowly walked out from this crimson scene. Chapter 641. Under the crimson sunset, a woman in a pink dress slowly walked over on the path by the crimson lake. This woman's face was definitely comparable to Happy's, and her figure was comparable to Emma's. What was the ceiling of pure lust? Emosure felt that this woman was it. This woman slowly walked towards Emosure. She had a charming smile on her face. With such a face, such a figure, and such a charming smile, not many men would reject her. I am Du Kong from the Myriad Poison Star. If Instructor Emo is free, please come with me. He didn't have any ruthlessness on his face. Instead, he gave people the urge to fall in love with him. Emosure looked at this woman with a faint smile on his face. All right, I'll go with you. Du Kong was slightly stunned when he heard this. Then he shook his head. He thought that it was some ruthless character that he had to deal with personally. He didn't expect that he would be moved with just one sentence. He was really disappointed. In fact, after Emosure killed the 2 envoys from the Myriad Poison Star, he knew that the Myriad Poison Star Lord wouldn't let it go. He would definitely send more people over. However, he didn't expect that the Myriad Poison Star Lord would send a woman. However, it didn't matter whether it was a man or a woman. As long as it was a human, he would go with them and destroy the Myriad Poison Star. Otherwise, even if he killed this woman, the Myriad Poison Star would still send more people over. Moreover, they would be stronger and more numerous. Troublesome. He might as well go with them and destroy the entire Myriad Poison Star in one go. According to Emosure's understanding, the Myriad Poison Star had about 50,000 poison attribute giant dragons. It should be enough for him to advance to rank 10. He might even be able to advance to become an ancient giant dragon. When he thought about ancient giant dragons, Emosure felt a little excited. Du Kong saw that Emosure had already stood up. He smiled charmingly and said, "Let's go." Emosure shouted towards the villa behind him, "Lei Rin, I'm going to the Myriad Poison Star. I'll be back in 1 or 2 days or at most 1 or 2 months. Don't let anyone find me, understand?" Lei Rin, who was cultivating in the courtyard, was shocked when he heard Emosure's shout. Myriad Poison Star? Big Brother Emo is actually going to the Myriad Poison Star? This was incredible. He quickly jumped out of the courtyard. Emosure waved his hand at her and flew to the aircraft in the sky with the woman. Lei Rin cursed in his heart. At this moment he couldn't catch up. Even if he caught up, there was nothing he could do. He could only inform the dean of this news as soon as possible. The expressions of the dean and the others also changed drastically. Lei Rin, are you sure Instructor Emo left with a smile on his face? Lei Rin nodded. Also, he said that he would be going to Myriad Poison Star for at least a day or 2 or at most a month. He told us not to look for him. The dean looked at the other instructors and pondered for a moment. Finally he said, I think Instructor Emo must have his own plans. With Instructor Mo's strength, we shouldn't worry about him. Perhaps he just wants to go to Myriad Poison Planet to broaden his horizons. As for those people on Myriad Poison Planet wanting to harm him, I don't think that's possible. Instructor Emo has mastered all kinds of attributes, especially the time and space attributes. It won't be that easy for those people from the Myriad Poison Star to kill him. Should we inform the Star Master about this? The Star Master is also Instructor Mo's disciple. He has the right to know. Of course, we must inform the Star Master about this. Thus, the Dean reported this matter to the Star Master, Kong Hai. When Kong Hai heard about this, he was shocked at first. Then he quickly gathered his strategists for a discussion. However, after much discussion, the outcome was the same as what the Dean had said. Since Emosure had been so confident at the time, they didn't need to panic. Moreover, Kong Hai had absolute trust in Instructor Emo. He believed that with Instructor Mo's ability, if the Myriad Poison Star tried to force him to stay, the Myriad Poison Star would suffer in the end. At the same time, Emosure and Du Kong had already boarded the spaceship in the sky. Du Kong said with a hint of mockery, "Did you just say that it would take at least a day or 2 or at most a month or 2 to return?" Emosure nodded and asked seriously, "Is there something wrong?" Du Kong chuckled. "Let me tell you a secret. No one who goes to Myriad Poison Star leaves alive." After he finished speaking, he looked at Emosure's face as if he wanted to see a trace of fear on Emosure's face. However, Emosure only responded with a simple, "Oh." Then he turned his head to admire the beautiful scenery below. This slightly surprised Du Kong. This guy seemed to have a card up his sleeve. However, it was obvious that this guy wasn't confident. He was just blindly arrogant. What kind of place was Myriad Poison Star? Among the hundreds of planets nearby, Myriad Poison Star was like hell. Even if you were a rank 5, 6, or 7 super-evolved dragon, so what? Even the air on Myriad Poison Star was poisonous. Once you arrived at Myriad Poison Star, you would be poisoned. The energy in your body would be very sluggish. If you forced it, your meridians would break and you would die. Under such circumstances, even if you were strong, what could you do? The distance from Myriad Poison Star to Cloud Sea Planet was quite far. If they flew there directly, it would take at least 3 to 4 days. However, in highly developed space civilizations, there were wormholes connecting them. These wormholes were called Big Bug Bridges. Mo Shi and Du Kong took the spaceship and arrived at the Big Bug Bridge closest to Cloud Sea Planet. After paying 1,000 dragon coins, they passed through the Big Bug Bridge and arrived at the Big Bug Bridge near Myriad Poison Star. After flying for another half an hour, they finally arrived at Myriad Poison Star. As soon as they entered Myriad Poison Star's atmosphere, they could see that the entire Myriad Poison Star was shrouded in clouds of various colors. There were red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, white, and gray. If one looked at Myriad Poison Star from space, it would look like a big colorful ball. They passed through a large purple cloud. When they looked at the ground again, they saw that the ground below was covered with mountains and trees. Almost all of these trees were purple. However, the degree of purple varied. Some were deep purple, some were light purple, and some were purplish red. Even the water of a large lake below was purple. After passing through this purple forest, they arrived at a golden plain. Everything here seemed to be golden in color. All the trees and flowers were golden in color, including the lake water. Mo Shi had learned that this was because there were microbes of various colors in the lake water. Therefore, from above it looked like the lake water was the same color. At the center of this golden plain was a city. The scale of this city was far inferior to Cloud Sea Planet's Cloud Sea Planet. After all, Cloud Sea Planet had over 50 million people living in it. The total population of Myriad Poison Star was only around 50,000. Chapter 642. On the golden grassland, a golden city rose from the ground. Of course, this city wasn't as majestic or massive as Cloud Sea City. The city's exterior was also a dazzling golden color. The streets, the roads, the houses, and even the moat around the city were golden in color. Mo Shi was speechless at this sight. Wasn't it boring to see nothing but gold from the moment you opened your eyes in the morning until the moment you closed them at night? Mo Shi scanned the city with his magical will and discovered that the most powerful creature in the city was a 7th grade super-evolved dragon. That person was probably Star Lord Du Qianhua of Myriad Poisons. According to historical records, Myriad Poisons was still an undeveloped planet 2,000 years ago. Very few dragons would come to this planet. Even dragons with the poison attribute wouldn't come to this planet. That was because this planet was simply too dangerous. Even if you played with poison, you might lose your life if you weren't careful. Only those fugitives who were wanted by various planets and had nowhere else to go would escape to this place. Slowly, more and more fugitives appeared. When they discovered the terror of Myriad Poisons, these fugitives had no choice but to band together for protection. They started to band together and slowly formed an army with combat power. Slowly, more and more people appeared, and so did the army. Finally, there were over 70,000 dragons in total. As the saying went, where there were humans there was a society. Where there were dragons there was also a society. As more and more armies appeared, these armies often fought each other for the sake of profit. Everyone was a fugitive. There was no reason to reason with each other. Profit was everything here. That was until Dragon Du Qianhua appeared 2,000 years ago. Back then he was only a 5th grade super-evolved dragon. However, even a 5th grade super-evolved dragon was an invincible existence on the planet at the time. Thus, he led 2 of his subordinates and started to recruit these armies. Anyone who wasn't willing to join them was exterminated. In the end, only 50,000 dragons were left on the planet. These 50,000 dragons were all recruited by him. After their construction, they finally built a city on the plains. The city of Myriad Poisons. When their city of Myriad Poisons was built, the government came looking for them. However, this time the government wasn't here to capture them. They were too powerful and they were backed by Myriad Poison Planet, a planet full of danger. If they wanted to capture them, they would have to pay a huge price. He might as well make Du Qianhua the Star Lord and let him manage these fugitives. The final outcome was indeed very satisfactory to the officials. Du Qianhua accepted their conferment. At the same time, under Du Qianhua's management, These fugitives almost never left Myriad Poison Planet. This was the history of the Myriad Poisons Planet's Myriad Poison City. However, Du Qianhua's ambition did not stop there. Who wouldn't want to go to those highly developed civilized planets to enjoy themselves? Compared to those highly developed civilized planets, the Myriad Poison Planet was like a barren wasteland. Apart from the Myriad Poison City, which was barely worth looking at, the other places were filled with trepidation. However, if you want to develop on other planets, you will need strength. The increase in strength was firstly based on the increase in the level of the dragons, and secondly based on the number of dragons. Now that there was no way to increase the number of dragons in a short period of time, he could only let the dragons under him increase their strength as soon as possible. Therefore, when he heard that there was a mentor Mo Shi who could raise any dragon's level by 1 or even 5 levels in a short period of time, he sent someone to look for Mo Shi. Mo Shi followed Du Kong into the Myriad Poison City. Only then did he realize that his previous thoughts were completely unnecessary. Although the Myriad Poison City looked completely golden on the outside, in fact, after entering the city, he realized that the inside of the city was not much different from an ordinary city. They might have used some kind of high-tech method to make the city look golden on the outside. Walking on the streets of the Myriad Poison City, the people coming and going were all like the non-mainstream people Mo Shi had seen on Earth. Some had red hair, some had green hair, and some had yellow hair. People who didn't know better would think that the traffic lights had turned into spirits. Some had very dark eyeshadow, some had green eyeshadow, and some had purple eyeshadow. Their clothes were also brightly colored. Mo Shi thought to himself that in the natural world, the brighter the color of a creature, the more poisonous it was. When these people looked at Mo Shi, they seemed to be harboring evil intentions. Through their memories, Mo Shi knew that the Myriad Poison Star had a method of refining poison using living people. These people obviously treated themselves as ingredients for refining poison. However, when they saw Du Kong walking beside Mo Shi, they quickly retracted their gazes. Du Kong was a famous character on the Myriad Poison Star. In the past, countless men had designs on him, but they all disappeared without a trace. Many people said that those men were refined into poison by him. Mo Shi followed Du Kong all the way to the Myriad Poison Palace at the center of the Myriad Poison City. Because Du Kong was leading him, he was able to pass through without any obstructions until they reached the Myriad Poison Hall at the center of the Myriad Poison Palace. After being notified, the Myriad Poison Star's Star Lord, Du Qianhua, arrived at the Myriad Poison Hall. A group of civil and military officials stood on both sides. Du Qianhua praised Du Kong first. Sure enough, it's still the Poison Lady. Thank you for your hard work, Poison Lady. Please take a seat. Very quickly, the servants brought over 2 chairs. The Poison Lady, Du Kong, chuckled and sat not far away from Du Qianhua. Du Qianhua sized up Mo Shi from head to toe with a face full of joy and said with a sincere smile, "Instructor Mo is finally here. My 2 subordinates were insensible and offended Instructor Mo. Please don't blame them." Mo Shi chuckled, "It's fine." Du Qianhua continued, "This time, I invited Instructor Mo here mainly to ask Instructor Mo to help us raise the strength of the residents of the Myriad Poison Star." The civil and military officials already knew that Mo Shi could raise their strength, and at this moment, all of them had looks of anticipation in their eyes. Mo Shi chuckled and asked, "What happens after I help you raise your strength?" "Of course, we will reward Instructor Mo handsomely. Whatever Instructor Mo wants, feel free to tell us as long as we can do it." Mo Shi smiled, "You don't want to kill me?" The moment these words came out, Du Qianhua's face turned cold. In fact, that was what he had in mind. First, he would ask Mo Shi to raise the strength of all the residents of the Myriad Poison Star, and after that he would kill Mo Shi. He couldn't allow Mo Shi to raise the strength of the residents of other planets. Mo Shi knew this through plundering Du Qianhua's memories. At this moment, Du Qianhua also removed his disguise. "You're right. After you raise our strength, you have 2 choices. One is to stay on the Myriad Poison Star, the other is to die." Mo Shi chuckled, "And if I say no?" Chapter 643. What if I say no? Mo Shi asked with a chuckle. Du Qianhua did not seem angry at all. If Instructor Mo says no, then there is no problem. "Don't worry, we are all civilized dragons, we will not be rough with you." Men. Following Du Qianhua's voice, 2 soldiers came down from the hall. They brought a person with them. That person was covered in blood from head to toe. The blood in some places had dried for a long time and had turned black. In other places, It was obvious that the wounds had just appeared and fresh blood was still flowing out. However, with the self-healing ability of dragons, the wounds had quickly scabbed over after a minute. Du Qianhua smiled and waved his hand, and the two soldiers immediately pressed down on the dragon. Then they reached out and pressed on the scab that had just formed on the dragon's wound, and tore it open. The dragon's wound immediately tore open again. Ah! A heart-wrenching roar erupted from the dragon's throat. After a minute, the wound scabbed over again. The two soldiers once again pressed on the scab that had just formed and tore it apart. Ah! A huge roar erupted from the dragon's throat, reverberating in the entire hall. This was repeated 3 times, and the dragon was already curled up in pain. During this process, the civil and military officials in the hall did not have any sympathy or pity. Instead, they all looked like they were watching a show. Du Qianhua smiled and explained to Emosher, "This person snuck into our 1,000 poison planet a month ago and tried to steal our secrets. After he was discovered, he was punished like this. We will make him beg for death and make him suffer 100 times a day." Instructor Emo, did you enjoy watching it? After Du Qianhua finished speaking, the civil and military officials looked at Emosher with ridicule and mockery in their eyes. They seemed to be impatient to see Emosher's terrified expression. However, Emosher chuckled, "It's just so. The moment he said this, the civil and military officials were slightly shocked. How could this guy still be so calm? Du Qianhua was also very surprised. He had seen a lot of people who looked tough on the outside, but in the face of a life-and-death threat, they would basically give in instantly. However, this instructor Emo actually laughed and said something in the face of such a threat. He carefully observed Emosher's expression, trying to see if he was pretending to be calm. However, he did not see any trace of pretense in Emosher's expression. However, in addition to being surprised, he was also a little angry in his heart. He had been the master of the Myriad Poison Star for more than 1,000 years. In the past 1,000 years, he had been the only king on Myriad Poison Planet. Even the official emissaries had to be polite to him when they came to Myriad Poison Planet. However, this guy was clearly captured and brought to Myriad Poison Planet, yet he was still so arrogant. How preposterous. He didn't even take me, the master of Myriad Poison Planet, seriously. Men? Du Qianhua growled. Yes. Immediately, another 10 warriors came to the hall. Every warrior had the strength of a Tier 4 super-evolved giant dragon. Du Qianhua looked at Emosher and snorted coldly, "Since Instructor Emo doesn't want to accept the toast, then he will accept the punishment." Then he waved his hand and the 10 warriors strode towards Emosher. Colorful energy appeared in each of their hands. In terms of color, these energies were not like the reserved colors of the metal, wood, water, fire, and earth energies. The colors of these energies were very exaggerated. Red was blood red, green was bright green. Each color was as exaggerated and bright as possible, making people feel uncomfortable just by looking at them. It was obvious that they were all poison-attributed energies. Not all poison-type energies were dark green in color. In the natural world, there were thousands of poison-attributed energies. And these giant dragons focused on the poison attribute so their energy would appear that color. These 10 warriors were Du Qianhua's 10 poison guards. After Du Qianhua became the master of the Myriad Poison Guards, he trained a total of 20 poison guards. They were responsible for his personal safety. Each poison guard was a Tier 3 super-evolved giant dragon. These 20 poison guards could be said to be the strongest force on Myriad Poison Planet. It was no exaggeration to say that with these 20 poison guards, it would be easy for him to take over a city. Du Qianhua knew that Emosher was a Tier 3 super-evolved giant dragon, so he sent out his 10 poison guards. But these 10 poison guards were only 3 meters away from Emosher. Boom! 10 explosions were heard all of a sudden. These 10 explosions sounded almost at the same time, so it sounded like one. Then these 10 people turned into 10 clouds of blood mist. But the blood mist was not blood red. Instead, it was the same as their energy. There were all kinds of colors. Bright green, blood red, purplish black, and bright yellow. In an instant, the blood mist of all kinds of colors enveloped Emosher. Emosher was completely enveloped. Emosher waved his sleeves lightly and scattered the blood mist. The entire hall fell into a dead silence. Everyone looked at Emosher as if they were looking at a monster. Many people's eyes were filled with deep fear and some people were surprised. Du Qianhua's face turned cold. How did this guy do it? He did not even move and the poison guards around him all exploded. This was completely beyond Du Qianhua's understanding and knowledge. Could it be a spatial skill? From what Du Qianhua knew, Emosher had skills of various attributes. Thinking of this, he hurriedly shouted, "Du Kong, I'm right here. A voice suddenly sounded in front of him, and the next moment, Du Kong's alluring figure slowly appeared. Du Kong was a Tier 6 super-evolved giant dragon with both poison and spatial attributes. She glanced at the blood mist that had yet to completely disperse, then looked at Emosher. It seems that I underestimated you before. She had wanted to forcefully bring Emosher back, but before she could do anything, Emosher was mesmerized by her appearance and took the initiative to follow her. This had disappointed her, thinking that Emosher was just an old pervert. She never expected that Emosher would instantly kill 10 poison guards as soon as he arrived. In just 1 second, 10 Tier 4 super-evolved giant dragons had been killed. Du Kong could do it herself. Now that Emosher could do it as well, she was naturally interested in Emosher. If you listen to the Star Lord, I can spare your life. Du Kong still had that charming smile on her face. At the same time, she secretly took precautions in the space around her to prevent Emosher from using another spatial skill to attack her. However, just as she finished speaking, bang! Her entire body exploded into a cloud of blood mist. The dark green blood even splattered on the faces of the ministers near her. At this moment, the expressions of all the ministers changed drastically. Even the Star Lord of Myriad Poisons, Du Qianhua, was shocked. Chapter 644. Emosher didn't even need to lift a finger to deal with those poison guards. He was able to kill them in an instant. This was barely acceptable. However, even the 6th grade super-evolved dragon Du Kong had been killed by Emosher in an instant. He still didn't even need to lift a finger. That was unbelievable. The expressions of all the poison dragons who had been dismissive of Emosher changed drastically. Even their Star Master, Du Qianhua, was shocked. That's impossible. Du Kong is a 6th grade super-evolved dragon. Moreover, he has both air and poison attributes. This guy is too terrifying. Terror appeared in Du Qianhua's eyes when he saw this. He put on a brave front and shouted at Emosher, "You have been poisoned by at least 30 different poisons since the moment you entered Myriad Poison's planet. If you dare kill us, who can cure you of your poison?" Boom. Du Qianhua had just finished speaking when he exploded into a cloud of blue blood mist. Moreover, his blue blood spread in every direction, enveloping all the dragons present. The more than 30 civil and military officials present all trembled violently. It was important to note that Du Qianhua was a 6th grade super-evolved dragon. Ever since he entered Myriad Poison's planet, he had started off as a dog. He slowly recruited other teams and finally became the Star Master, ruling over Myriad Poison's planet for over 2,000 years. It wasn't hard to imagine how powerful he was. However, he never expected to explode into a cloud of blood mist without being able to put up any resistance in front of this guy. Just how powerful was this guy? Even a 7th grade, 8th grade, or even a 9th grade super-evolved dragon wouldn't be able to stand still and kill a 6th grade super-evolved dragon with a single finger. Moreover, as the Star Master, Du Qianhua must have collected at least 10 life-saving measures over the years. Yet they were all useless against this guy. That meant he was very likely a 10th grade super-evolved dragon. No. Even a rank 10 super-evolved WRM couldn't kill a rank 6 super-evolved WRM that had dozens of life-saving means in seconds without even moving a finger. Could he be one of the legendary primordial dragons? The legendary primordial dragons? Heavens! These people had no idea what primordial dragons were. They only knew that primordial dragons were above 10th grade super-evolved dragons. But they had never seen it. Only the history books had records of ancient dragons. Furthermore, it was only in ancient myths and legends in the history books that ancient dragons appeared. It was said that the ancient dragons could easily destroy a planet. Judging from the current situation, this guy did not even need to lift a finger to kill so many people. This meant that he was undoubtedly an ancient dragon. At the thought of this, the dragons all turned pale. This guy wasn't even afraid of being poisoned by dozens of poisons, so it was obvious that he had some kind of method to deal with them. If that was the case, wouldn't they be bringing a fiend to the Myriad Poison Star by force? In the midst of the terror, a giant dragon said while trembling, "Sir Senior, all of this was the Star Master's idea. Now that the Star Master is dead, and the person who brought you here has also been killed, please spare us." "Yes, none of this has anything to do with us. I didn't agree with the Star Master's idea from the beginning. Sir, it really has nothing to do with us. Senior, if you're willing, we'll all listen to your orders and do anything for you. The entire Myriad Poison planet will be yours." Emosher sneered. Now that they regretted it, what were they doing earlier? Some of the giant dragons saw from Emoshur's expression that Emoshur would never let them go. Thus, he directly crushed a skill stone that stored a spatial skill. He wanted to escape from this place. However, the skill stone was crushed, but he stayed where he was without moving. His eyes immediately widened as he looked at the fragments of the skill stone in his hand in disbelief. Could it be that this skill stone was fake? However, it wasn't just his skill stone that was useless. The other people's skill stones were also crushed, but they were all useless. Emoshur smiled faintly. Don't bother, it's useless. He had already used spatial skills to imprison the hall. It was impossible for anyone who entered the hall to use spatial skills to escape. Even a giant dragon with spatial attributes couldn't escape easily. This was because Emoshur's spatial skills came from the Void Dragon's 9 transformations. The Void Dragon's 9 transformations was the culmination of all spatial skills. Even a giant dragon that was 1 grade higher than him would find it difficult to escape from his spatial skills. Unless a giant dragon that was 2 grades higher than him forcefully broke through his spatial skills with energy. However, he was already an 8th grade super evolved giant dragon. There were no 10th grade super evolved giant dragons on this planet. When these people realized that they couldn't escape, they were all scared out of their wits. They almost simultaneously knelt down before Emoshur. Some of them even prostrated themselves on the ground and repeatedly shouted, "Instructor Emo, please let us go. Senior Emo, Lord Emo, please let us go. We won't do it again, we won't do it again. Instructor Emo, Senior Emo, as long as you let us go, we're willing to do anything." However, Emoshur couldn't be bothered with them. He waved his right hand lightly, and a dark green energy flew out from between his fingers. This dark green energy turned into a 5-meter-long divine dragon, not a Western dragon but an Eastern one. This divine dragon meandered in the air. These giant dragons had never seen such a creature. Humans were always filled with fear of the unknown. Their faces were all pale. They floated on the ground, not daring to move. Meanwhile, the dark green dragon continued to meander in the air. When it reached the center of the hall, boom! It suddenly exploded. In an instant, the entire hall was filled with dark green smoke. The bodies of the ministers and generals rapidly rotted in this dark green smoke. Their hair fell off and the skin on their faces rotted away. One could see the flesh and bones on their faces. Even their bones were rapidly corroding. Ah! No. My lord senior, please let us go. These people screamed in agony as if they were pigs being slaughtered. However, there was no pity in Emoshur's eyes. These people had killed countless people and harmed countless lives to reach their current positions. They deserved more than death. In the end, these 30-some ministers and generals all died from the poison they thought they were best at. Next, Emoshur leaped and broke through the hall. A pair of dark green wings unfurled from his back. He quickly flew 500 meters into the air. Looking down at the golden city below, the 5 fingers of his right hand moved slightly, and another dark green dragon condensed between his fingers. This dragon was hundreds of times larger than the previous one. It was more than 3,000 meters long. The dragon meandered in the air. Although it was condensed from poison energy, its scales, claws, teeth and dragon whiskers all looked real. When the residents of the city below saw this, they were all aghast. Chapter 645. 1,000-meter-long dark green poison dragon coiled in the air. Its scales, claws, fangs and whiskers were all clearly visible. No one had ever condensed energy into something so lifelike. However, this was only the first transformation of the poison dragon. When the residents of the myriad poison city below saw this, their expressions changed drastically. They could feel the enormous energy contained in the poison dragon's body. They had never felt such tremendous energy from any creature before. When the soldiers below saw this, their expressions changed greatly. Although the entire upper echelon of the Myriad Poison Star had been killed by Emoshur, the warriors of the Myriad Poison Star were well trained. They quickly gathered and activated the defensive array. Their defensive array was also of the poison attribute. This poison attribute could defend against both physical and energy attacks. Its principle was to cover the defensive barrier with extremely powerful corrosive toxins. This poison attribute could even corrode energy. That was why it would corrode any external physical or energy attack. This defensive array was built by the previous Myriad Poisons Planet Lord. It was said that it could defend against the attacks of super-evolved dragons of grade 8 and above. In truth, the poison dragon in the sky would not be able to break through this energy barrier in terms of sheer energy. However, it was important to remember that the 9 transformations of the poison dragon was a combination of all poison attribute techniques and techniques. It was a unique technique that took their strengths and made up for their weaknesses. It could counter all poison attribute techniques. That was why when the 1,000-meter-long dark green poison dragon came into contact with the colorful poison barrier, the barrier quickly melted away like blood coming into contact with fire. A short moment later, a 1,000-meter-wide hole was melted away. The poison dragon went straight in and bombarded the humans below. The poison dragon let out a long roar and charged toward the center of Myriad Poison City. It did not attack any buildings or dragons. Instead, it blasted toward the ground. Emosure had never used the 9 transformations of the poison dragon in actual combat since he had mastered it. He had never even used the first transformation in actual combat. In the 10,000 Poison City, every single one of them had their hands stained with blood. They had committed all sorts of evil deeds on other planets and were wanted by those planets. They had nowhere else to go, which was why they had come to Myriad Poison's planet. That was why Emosure wanted to use them to test the power of the first transformation of the poison dragon. However, at this moment, a black energy disk about 1,000 meters in diameter stopped the descending poison dragon. Bang! The poison dragon slammed into the black energy disk and exploded, forming a bloody mist with a diameter of tens of kilometers. It almost covered the entire sky of the City of Poisons. Looking up from the Myriad Poison City, the entire sky seemed to have turned dark green. One could imagine how serious the consequences would be if the poison dragon had exploded on the ground. At this moment, the black energy disk rose up and extended upwards, finally forming a huge black energy ball that enveloped the dark green smoke. Then it gradually shrank until it finally became a poison ball with a diameter of about 20 meters. This poison pill was so concentrated that it looked almost black. Even a level 10 super-evolved dragon would not be able to withstand the poison. At the same time, a voice suddenly rang out, "Where it is possible to let people off, one should spare them. Kid, you've gone too far." The voice seemed to come from underground. Moreover, no matter which corner of the city you were in or outside of the city, you would hear the sound as if it was coming from under your feet. The people in the Myriad Poison City were all stunned. Then the fear on their faces turned into surprise. It's Poison King. That's right. It's the Poison King. Wasn't the Poison King already dead? What's going on? In the sky, after Emosure absorbed the memories of these people, he quickly understood what was going on with the Poison King. It turned out that thousands of years ago, before Du Qianhua arrived, the Myriad Poison planet did not have a Star Lord. At that time there was a Poison King. No one knew when the Poison King had appeared. It seemed that the Poison King had already existed when the first person arrived on the Myriad Poison planet. He seemed to be very strong. Legend had it that he was able to withstand all the poisonous creatures in the Myriad Poison Mountain alone and come out unscathed. There were also people who said that they had once seen the Poison King in his dragon form. It was a poisonous dragon that was close to 10,000 meters long. Moreover, he was not only poisonous but also earth-attributed. He was often able to merge with the earth. If he did not want to be discovered, even if you walked past him, it would be difficult to discover him. Under normal circumstances, the Poison King would not touch other people. He would only act when those people violated his interests. After Du Qianhua came to the Myriad Poison planet, the Poison King never appeared again. Some people said that he had already left the Myriad Poison planet, while others said that he was already dead. No one would have thought that the Poison King, who had not appeared for over 2,000 years, was still alive. When Emosure discovered this, he was slightly surprised. No wonder he did not use his demonic will to detect this guy. It turned out that he had merged with the earth. Based on how that guy was able to withstand the first transformation of his poison dragon, that guy should be at least rank 9. Otherwise, he would not be able to withstand the first transformation of the poison dragon. That guy might even be a rank 10 super-evolved dragon. However, Emosure did not care at all. As long as he was not an ancient dragon, it would be easy to deal with him. This was only the first transformation of the poison dragon. If you have the ability, you can try to withstand the 3rd transformation, 5th transformation, or even the 9th transformation. Just as Emosure was pondering, a blue poisonous vine shot out from the ground towards Emosure, who was in the air. Before Emosure could react, it wrapped around Emosure's body. Emosure struggled a few times, but he was unable to break free. The poisonous vine had sharp thorns on it, and it looked like it would soon pierce through his body and inject some kind of poison into his body. When the residents below saw this, they were all overjoyed. Under the Poison King's attack, this guy could not even withstand a single attack. Even so, he still wanted to massacre the Thousand Poison City. What a joke. Since Emosure could not break free, he simply used a spatial skill and teleported away. Dozens of poisonous vines stretched out from below. At first, Emosure was still dodging, constantly teleporting away from these poisonous vines. But soon more and more poisonous vines appeared below. With Emosure's speed, he was almost unable to dodge. Therefore, Emosure used a temporal skill, causing the poisonous vines to shoot at him to become very slow when they were within 100 meters of him. It was like slow motion in a movie. In this way, the poisonous vines could not hurt him at all. When the residents below saw this, they were all shocked once again. At the same time, a voice came from below: poison attribute, spatial attribute, and temporal attribute. 3 attributes. This little guy is quite interesting. Chapter 646. Along with the sound coming from the ground, the entire ground began to shake. It was like the shaking of an earthquake. All the houses and buildings began to shake violently. Huge cracks began to appear on the ground. Hundreds and thousands of vines stretched out from the cracks. These vines were not formed by the vines of plants, but by the condensation of soil. Each of these vines was about 10 meters thick. They were like giant pythons crawling toward the ground. Then they slowly raised their heads and climbed toward the sky. When their heads reached the highest point, they intertwined with each other. Then, a human figure condensed from the heads of those giant pythons. It looked like it was formed by the vines of soil. In fact, because it was of the earth attribute, its cells could integrate with the soil very well. On the surface, it looked like it was formed by the soil. In fact, it was only because the soil covered its tracks that it gave people a very shocking feeling. The people in the 10,000 Poison City were all dumbstruck when they saw this. It did not look like teleportation. It was transformation. A human could turn into soil, and then soil could turn into a giant dragon. This was a little too King mysterious. However, Emosure, who had the demonic dragon's eye, could easily see this point. He did not show any surprise on his face. He carefully sized up the guy. He saw that the guy was dressed in yellow clothes and looked to be about 12 or 13 years old. His face still had a childish look. However, his eyes looked as if they had traveled through thousands of years. It was actually a child's face. This once again caused a burst of exclamations from the giant dragons present. They thought that such a powerful Poison King would be an adult or even an old man. They did not expect him to be a child who looked to be in his teens. In the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone, the human form was just another skin of the giant dragons. If they wanted to, they could use several methods to make their human appearance look very young. However, ordinary giant dragons would not do this. Because it was purely unnecessary to take off one's pants and fart. If they fought, they would still transform into their dragon form. Now the Poison King was just a child who looked to be in his teens. This still surprised the giant dragons. Emosure looked at the Poison King from head to toe and then looked at the people in the city. He sneered and said, "Those who stand in my way will die." The Poison King laughed. "What arrogance! Today I will protect them." Since they didn't see eye to eye, he naturally didn't say anything more. Emosure didn't say anything else. He waved his right hand in the air. 2 balls of dark green energy condensed in his hands. The 2 balls of dark green energy quickly took shape. They formed 3 dark green dragons that were more than 20 meters long. The claws, fangs, tails, wings, and eyes of the 3 dark green dragons were all very lifelike. Its eyeballs could even move around like a real dragon. At first, the 3 dark green dragons were only about 20 meters long, but as Emosure continued to pour energy into them, their bodies began to grow rapidly. With Emosure's current strength, he could only execute the 3rd transformation of the lone dragon. The 3 dragons quickly reached a length of 100 meters. Of course, the Poison King also sensed the enormous energy within the 3 dragons. He knew that Emosure was going to use a big move. He wouldn't let Emosure condense the 3 dragons. Thus he raised his right hand in the air. In an instant, more than 10 Earth-type vines condensed on the ground and wrapped around Emosure. However, when the Earth-type vines were about to reach Emosure, they suddenly slowed down. They were so slow that no one could see them moving forward. From the visual effect, it looked as if Emosure was doing nothing. When the Earth-type vines reached Emosure, they suddenly stopped. Seeing this, the Poison King frowned. There was extreme disbelief in his voice. Time attribute? This guy actually had the time attribute. The Poison King had lived for so long, but he had never seen a guy with the time attribute. Now, he actually encountered a guy with the time attribute. The most unbelievable thing was that this guy clearly had 3 attributes. How could he have the time attribute? One had to know that in the history of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone, there had never been a dragon with 4 attributes. In other words, this guy had already broken through history. Even so, the Poison King couldn't let embark condense the 3 poison-type dragons like this. He waved his right hand again, and hundreds of huge cone-shaped rocks on the ground flew toward embark in the sky. These cone-shaped rocks were like the tip of a spear, but each one was 100 meters long. However, these cone-shaped rocks stopped when they were 100 meters away from embark. Then they stopped moving. Because the space around these cone-shaped rocks was confined by embark. They couldn't move forward, they couldn't move backward, they couldn't go up, they couldn't go down. Seeing this, the Poison King couldn't help but be angry. A mere rank 8. What do you think I am? As he spoke, he waved his hand again, and the huge cone-shaped rocks rose into the air again. It was as if someone was exerting a force on these cone-shaped rocks out of thin air. He wanted to use the fact that he was 2 ranks higher than embark to forcibly break through embark's spatial confinement. This was the natural suppression of ranks. Even if your attributes were strong, when the opponent was 2 ranks higher than you, many of your skills would be forcibly broken through by the opponent's brute force. At this moment, embark raised his head and looked at the 3 poison-type dragons. He saw that the 3 poison-type dragons had already finished absorbing the energy. Next was the expansion period. He didn't need to worry about them anymore. Thus, a large amount of chaotic energy appeared in his left hand, and a large amount of black energy appeared in his right hand. These 2 types of energy intertwined in the air, quickly forming a huge black hole with a diameter of more than 50 meters. Time in his left hand, space in his right. Time and space intertwined. That huge black hole was like the mouth of a giant beast, rapidly swallowing everything around it. The huge cone-shaped rocks that were attacking embark were easily swallowed into the black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King was slightly surprised. What kind of skill was this? He had never seen it before. But it didn't matter. As long as the level was high enough and the energy was large enough, it could forcibly break through any of this guy's skills. Thus, he directly released a large amount of Earth-type energy and condensed it into an Earth-type giant. This Earth-type giant was more than 500 meters tall. It looked like it had a very shocking visual effect. Of course, compared to embark's dragons, this Earth-type giant was far less realistic. Embark's dragons were like extremely detailed and realistic figurines. On the other hand, the Poison King's Earth attribute giant was like a rough sculpture with only the outline and no details added. Chapter 647. It was the Poison King's Earth attribute giant. His purpose was to use brute force to break through embark's space-time black hole. He felt that as long as his level was higher than embark's, he would be able to crush embark with brute force. However, was that really the case? His Earth attribute giant ignored embark's space-time black hole and directly attacked embark's body. However, when the Earth attribute giant passed through the space-time black hole, a huge suction force attacked the Earth attribute giant. The Earth attribute giant's head was almost instantly sucked into the space-time black hole. However, another head quickly condensed on the Earth attribute giant's neck. At the same time, there was an endless stream of stones on the ground that replenished the giant's body. The giant's body became even bigger and was now close to 600 meters tall. embark was slightly surprised. In the past, as long as he used the space-time black hole, he was basically invincible. This time he had encountered a tough opponent. It seemed that the higher the level, the stronger the strength and the more powerful the energy. This was an unchanging truth. However, it was a pity that the guy was just a space-time super-evolved dragon. If he was an ancient dragon, he might really be able to break through his space-time black hole. It was not just possible but definitely possible. Of course, embark was only guessing. He had never seen an ancient dragon before, so he didn't know how powerful an ancient dragon was. At the same time, he felt that it was necessary to strengthen his training of the time attribute and space attribute as soon as possible. It was very difficult for his level to rise to that of an ancient dragon in a short period of time. Therefore, it was necessary to train these 2 attributes. If he understood these 2 attributes better, his space-time black hole would be more powerful. Then, if he really encountered an ancient dragon, he would have a slight chance of winning. As embark continued to inject the time attribute and space attribute energy into the space-time black hole, the diameter of the black hole became bigger and bigger, reaching twice its previous size. At the same time, the suction force from the space-time black hole became stronger. The buildings, people, trees, and even the dragons on the ground were all sucked in. The huge suction force kept pulling at the giant. Although the Earth attribute giant was now 1,000 meters tall, he still seemed unable to resist the suction force of the spacetime black hole. He desperately tried to attack Emosher, but his upper body was constantly being pulled towards the black hole. Although there were still a large number of stones on the ground that were rapidly replenishing the giant's body, and the giant was still constantly growing in size, it was still unable to withstand the devouring power of the spacetime black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King teleported behind Emosher. He wanted to interrupt Emosher's replenishment of the spacetime black hole. However, Emosher had already expected this. The moment he appeared, Emosher teleported to the edge of the black hole. Then he looked at the Poison King provocatively. "Come over if you have the ability." Although the spacetime black hole could devour everything, it did not pose a threat to Emosher because it originated from Emosher. When the Poison King saw this, he knew that he wouldn't be able to get away with it. In a flash, he wanted to leave this place. However, his figure flashed twice, but he was unable to leave at all, because he suddenly realized that the entire space seemed to have been locked. Damn it. He cursed in his heart and hurriedly fell towards the ground. He was a poison attribute giant dragon and an earth attribute giant dragon. As long as he was in contact with the ground, he could use earth escape and go wherever he wanted. No one could stop him. When he fell towards the ground, Emosher did not stop him. Instead, he looked at him with a mocking smile. The Poison King's head was down and his feet were up. Like a diver, he plunged towards the ground. However, when he was 50 meters away from the ground, a huge black hole with a diameter of 100 meters suddenly appeared on the ground. At this moment, the Poison King was sinking towards the center of the black hole. Seeing this, the Poison King's expression changed greatly. What was going on? The black hole was clearly about 5 kilometers away from him. Why did it suddenly appear on the ground in front of him? With how much effort it took for that guy to condense a black hole, it was impossible for him to condense a second one in such a short time. However, he had no time to think about this. He hurriedly transformed into a poison dragon that was nearly 10,000 meters long. This poison dragon looked as if he had traveled through time and space. His old skin and his weathered eyes looked as if he had already existed since the beginning of the world. However, at this moment, his weathered eyes revealed a look of extreme fear. He flapped his giant wings that were nearly 10,000 meters wide and wanted to escape into the distance. However, a huge suction force came from behind him. His tail was already sucked into the black hole. He did not feel anything, but this made him extremely terrified. After all, no one knew what was inside the black hole. Would it be death or another world inside the black hole? People were always full of fear towards things that they were unfamiliar with. At this moment, the guy was extremely terrified. He flapped his wings with all his might, but it seemed to be useless. The huge suction force of the black hole had already swallowed his entire tail, followed by his butt and then his pair of hind legs. No! The guy's throat erupted with a horrified roar that sounded like the beginning of the universe. This roar seemed to be able to penetrate the entire planet. However, his body was still being swallowed by the black hole. In fear, he stretched out his wings as if he wanted to use his wide wings to block the black hole's entrance. However, he was still too naive. His wings were quickly swallowed as soon as they touched the edge of the black hole. The black hole did not care about your size. Of course, the black hole also had a capacity, but this capacity was so large that it was unimaginable. If Emosher did not care and allowed this black hole to develop, it would slowly swallow the entire planet and even the entire galaxy. At this moment, Emosher just smiled faintly. Therefore, it was ridiculous to want to use his wings to block the black hole's entrance. Seeing that he could not escape, the Poison King hurriedly begged Emosher, "Little guy, let me go. I have lived for more than 50,000 years and know many secrets of the planet. If you let me go, you will benefit for the rest of your life." Emosher did not pay attention to him at all. The Poison King's front claws kept flapping around, but it was useless. Finally, after a minute, the Poison King's figure disappeared into the black hole. At this moment, the Poison King that once terrified the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone was finally gone. When the people in the 10,000 Poison City saw that the Poison King was dead, they were all terrified and hurriedly fled in all directions. Chapter 648. 648. With a single move, countless lives were lost. Emosher's black hole swallowed the Poison King. When the residents of Myriad Poison City saw this, their expressions changed drastically as they fled in all directions. In the past, the city of myriad poisons had been a paradise for these desperados. It was their shelter, their harbor from the storm. However, the current myriad poison city was hell for them. Emosure watched as the residents of myriad poison city fled in all directions. He wasn't worried at all. He waved his hands lightly and the black hole on the ground disappeared. If this black hole was allowed to continue swallowing, forget about myriad poison city. The entire myriad poison planet and the entire galaxy would probably be swallowed up. At the same time, the 3 giant poison dragons in the sky had already reached 10,000 meters long. In the next moment, the 3 giant poison dragons flew toward the ground at the same time. At almost the same time, the giant poison dragons fiercely stabbed into the ground. In the next moment, it was as if a nuclear bomb had exploded. The entire myriad poison city, which was hundreds of kilometers in radius, was instantly swallowed up by the dark green shockwave. The shockwave quickly spread in all directions. All the buildings, animals, plants, and giant poison dragons were sucked into it. The creatures, buildings, stones, and wood that were sucked into the shockwave were all corroded into nothingness in a short period of time. Even the ground was corroded to a thickness of 5 meters. At the same time, a dark green mushroom cloud soared into the sky. If you had seen an atomic bomb before, you would be able to imagine the current situation. However, the smoke and shockwave formed by the atomic bomb here were all dark green in color. The shockwave continued to spread in all directions. None of the residents of Myriad Poison City were able to escape. The moment they were swallowed by the shockwave, they were corroded. Their flesh was corroded until only their bones were left. In the end, even their bones were corroded into nothingness. Emosure, who was in the sky, could only hear a series of miserable screams. However, his face was expressionless. For the residents of Myriad Poison City, Emosure's arrival was the end of the world. Moreover, the poison dragon's third transformation was far more powerful than this. The shockwave of the explosion destroyed the entire Myriad Poison City. However, the poison dragon's third transformation's greatest power lay in the mushroom cloud formed by the explosion. The mushroom cloud quickly spread in the sky, forming dark green smoke that enveloped an area of 10,000 kilometers. Within half an hour, everything within tens of thousands of kilometers was shrouded in thick fog. Under the cover of the thick fog, the leaves began to rot rapidly, the trees quickly decayed, and the mountain rocks quickly turned into gravel. The mountains that were tens of thousands of meters tall began to collapse like sand sculptures that had lost their moisture. The rivers and lakes within a radius of tens of thousands of kilometers also quickly turned dark green. The fishes and prawns in the sea and lakes all turned over and floated to the surface. The bodies of all the creatures in the forest began to rot rapidly. One had to know that these creatures were highly toxic to begin with. Many of them even had 7 or 8 types of toxins. However, under the poison dragon's third transformation, no creature could last more than a minute. From this, it could be seen how powerful the poison dragon transformation was. At the same time, Emosure's mind was flooded with messages. 3 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +3, 5 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +5, 9 giant dragons killed with poison, dragon slaying points +9. 5 minutes later, the spam in his mind finally stopped. At this time, his dragon slaying points had reached more than 30,000. Dragon slaying points, 3011310000. You can be promoted. Do you want to promote now? Emosure's eyes lit up as he looked at it. His face and ears were red. With more than 30,000 dragon slaying points, he could definitely promote himself to a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon. This promotion will take 5 minutes. During the promotion, the host cannot use energy to fight. Please find a safe place as soon as possible. Before the system's voice died away, Emosure had already entered Earth's space. In Earth's space, he accelerated time again. In almost an instant, 5 minutes had passed. Promotion successful. Promotion requires 5,000 dragon slaying points. The host's current dragon slaying points are 29113. You can be promoted. Do you want to promote now? Emosure rubbed his hands excitedly. Of course I want to promote. The next moment, the system's voice sounded in his mind again. This promotion will take 5 minutes. Emosure sped up the time again, and within a short 2 seconds, the 5 minutes had already passed. At the same time, the system's voice sounded in his mind again. Promotion successful. Emosure checked his level in his mind. Name, Emosure. Level, rank 10 super evolved giant dragon, rank 1 mystic. Ability. Click to expand. Goal, evolve into an ancient giant dragon. Few, Emosher let out a long breath. He had finally become a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon. As a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon, he could almost do whatever he wanted in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. After all, in the past 100,000 years, there had never been an ancient giant dragon in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. Therefore, a rank 10 super evolved giant dragon was the combat power ceiling of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. Emosher had only been in the Become Dragon Star Zone for less than 2 years, and he had already reached the peak. If it were other protagonists in novels, they would have gone out to show off and embarrass themselves. However, Emosher had always been a cautious person. Although no ancient giant dragons had appeared, who knew if there would be any hidden ancient giant dragons? Therefore, even if he had reached the combat power ceiling, he would not go out to show off and embarrass himself. Of course, he would not always be a yes man and hide in a corner. If someone dared to ride on his head, he would make that person regret it for the rest of his life. At this moment, he looked at the dragon slaying points required to evolve into an ancient giant dragon. Dragon slaying points, 24113100000. Ancient dragon crystal, 0 to 1, damn. Emosher could not help but exclaim. Just looking at the string of zeros behind the dragon slaying points made Emosher feel dizzy. The system explained very considerately frowny face there are 2 ways to evolve into an ancient giant dragon. The first way is to obtain 1 million dragon slaying points. The second way is to kill an ancient giant dragon and obtain 1 ancient dragon crystal. Emosher scratched his head. System, you directly changed the dragon slaying points from 5,000 to 1 million. Doesn't your conscience hurt? The system was silent and did not respond. Emosher shook his head helplessly and said again, for the second way, you want me to kill an ancient giant dragon. Does this mean that there are ancient giant dragons in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone? The system still ignored him. What AF * King Cold system? Emosher looked at the 2 methods carefully again. If he wanted to obtain 1 million dragon slaying points, there would have to be a war. Moreover, the death toll of a war within a planet would not exceed 1 million. Only in an interstellar war would the death toll exceed 1 million. However, if there was no special reason, would 2 planets have so much free time to start a war? Therefore, the first method would not work. Chapter 649. The first option, which was to kill millions of dragons, would not work for now. Therefore, Emosher set his sights on the second ancient dragon. However, as far as he knew, not a single ancient dragon had appeared in this world in the past 100,000 years. All the memories he had absorbed proved that there were no ancient dragons in this world. Therefore, the second option seemed even more unreliable than the first one. After thinking about it carefully, he still felt that the first option was slightly easier to achieve. Although this world did not have frequent wars, there would always be one every 1,000 years or so. With his current lifespan, he could live for tens of thousands of years. He could definitely wait. Moreover, even if Emosher could not wait for 1,000 years, he could still use other methods to kill these dragons. For example, right now, he could use his powerful strength to head to a certain planet and start a massacre. Of course, if he did that, he would quickly become the public enemy of the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. By then, he would probably be killed by the entire 10,000 Dragon Star Zone before he could evolve into an ancient dragon. He already had a preliminary plan in his mind at this moment. That was to establish an assassination organization. It was not as if there were no assassination organizations in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. These assassination organizations were paid to kill for others. Moreover, they appeared and disappeared mysteriously. It was very difficult to catch them. However, these assassination organizations adhered to one creed, and that was to never assassinate anyone from the government. Therefore, the government did not spend much effort to eliminate these assassination organizations. Some people even said that the government was behind these assassination organizations. However, this had never been proven. Of course, the government would never admit this. Emosher had already thought of a name for this assassination organization. It would be called the Lanling Association. And he would be the leader of the Lanling Association, the Lanling King. Moreover, he had already planned out how to operate it. With his current strength, he could create at most 500 clones. The power of each clone would be at the level of an 8th grade super evolved dragon. Moreover, as long as they did not die, each clone could exist for at least 24 hours. When that time came, he would not need to find other members. He could do all the work himself. This way, even if the government investigated, there would not be too many clues. After confirming this point, Emosher's heart finally calmed down. He boarded the spaceship and left 10,000 Poison Planet. When the spaceship flew out of 10,000 Poison Planet's atmosphere, he saw the location of 10,000 Poison City. With the myriad Poison City as the center, everything within a radius of 10,000 kilometers had turned dark green. From space it looked like a dark green spot. The next time a spaceship passed by, it would discover the abnormality of the myriad Poison Planet. However, this was not something Mosher needed to care about. After all, very few people came to myriad Poison Planet. Even if they did, so what if they were discovered? Even the government probably couldn't wait for the myriad Poison City on the myriad Poison Planet to be destroyed as soon as possible. Now that someone had done it for them, they couldn't be happier. Mosher used the Big Bug Bridge to return to the vicinity of planet Cloudsea. After another 2 hours of flying, he was finally back. When the Dean heard that Mosher had returned, he was extremely excited. Ever since Mosher left, he had been worried about Mosher. Mosher was finally back. At the same time, he was also amazed. How did Instructor Mo come back from the Myriad Poison Star? One had to know that ever since the Myriad Poison City on the Myriad Poison Planet was built, none of the giant dragons that went to the Myriad Poison Planet had ever returned alive. If the Master of the Stars knew that Mosher had not only returned, but also destroyed all the giant dragons in the Myriad Poison City, he would not know what to think. When the Master of the Stars, Kong Hai, heard that Mosher had returned, he immediately rushed to the Cloud Sea Academy. Seeing that Mosher was unharmed, Kong Hai was relieved. At the same time, he said to Mosher, "Instructor Mo, you didn't suffer any grievances over there, right? Don't worry. When the Cloud Sea planet develops, I will definitely lead troops to destroy the Myriad Poison Planet." Mosher didn't say anything when he heard this. He just shook his head with a faint smile. Kong Hai knew that Mosher must have thought that he was joking. He quickly extended his right hand and promised Mosher, "Instructor Mo, I am telling the truth. When the Cloud Sea Planet's star power reaches that level one day, I will destroy the Myriad Poison Planet first. I will avenge you, Instructor Mo." Mosher did not explain. He just nodded and said, "Okay, it's good that you have such intentions." The following days began to be peaceful again. Mosher continued to teach students and run cram classes at the same time. When he had free time, he had been secretly planning for the Lanling Association. Now the plan was almost complete. Actually, he could already release the news and start accepting jobs. However, Mosher was in a bit of a dilemma about how to release the news. If you released the news that you were accepting jobs, people with ulterior motives might be able to track you down through the news. According to Mosher's understanding, many assassin organizations in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone had been destroyed because of this reason. Therefore, assassin organizations now usually had their own special contacts and secret codes. There was also a very strict vetting process and so on. Mosher definitely could not do it alone. After thinking about it, he felt that the Lanling Association needed an opportunity to make a name for itself. After that, he would think of a way to find a contact. However, Mosher was racking his brains on how to get this opportunity. Mosher did not want to do it anymore. He had always been afraid of trouble. In the end, he decided to leave this matter to Emma. In fact, Emma was quite good at organizing. Moreover, after Mosher kept throwing those dragon corpses into Earth space and Emma drank their blood, Emma was now a super-evolved giant dragon. Moreover, she had evolved into a blood-type giant dragon that had never appeared in the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone. Her self-healing ability was extremely abnormal. Not to mention chopping off her head, even if only a piece of flesh was left, she could quickly recover. After she heard about Mosher's plan, she had been thinking about it in her heart. In the end, she had a joint plan in mind. However, this joint plan still needed Mosher to make a name for himself first. Of course, they needed an opportunity to make a name for themselves. They had to wait for such an opportunity now. Sometimes when one was lucky, someone would give them a pillow. Half a month later, such an opportunity came. On this day there was news. It was said that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea had been discovered in a certain star zone. As soon as this news spread, hundreds of nearby planets were instantly in an uproar. It was said that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were places where ancient giant dragons used to cultivate. These places contained a large number of treasures, cultivation techniques, and secret manuals. If one could get one or two of them in the Starry Sky Deep Sea, it was very likely that they would soar. If they could get their hands on a cultivation technique or secret manual, they might become the top combat power of the 10,000 Dragon Star Zone in a short time. Chapter 650. 650 Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest. Legend had it that in ancient times, there were no planets or galaxies. In the entire universe, there was only one continent which formed a vast expanse. Those ancient dragons lived on this continent. This continent was known as the Starry Ocean Continent. There were thousands of dragons living on the Starry Ocean Continent. Although the ancient dragons were born with great talent and strength, they still needed to cultivate. The oceans and forests of the Starry Ocean Continent were usually the places with the densest spirit energy. Therefore, many dragons would move to these places to live. Later on, there was a war in the Starry Ocean Continent that involved hundreds of billions of dragons. In this war, the Starry Ocean Continent suffered a devastating blow. Think about it, these dragons were all ancient dragons. It was imaginable how powerful they were. Emosher estimated that any random ancient dragon would be able to destroy an entire planet if they were still alive. How destructive would a battle between hundreds of billions of ancient colossal dragons be? Under their destruction, the Starry Ocean Continent was split into countless pieces of different sizes. After tens of billions of years, these pieces slowly formed into planets. The forests and oceans of the Starry Ocean Continent seemed to have some kind of energy that could not be destroyed. They floated in the universe and floated around. If one could get a Starry Sky Deep Sea or Starry Sky Forest, they would benefit immensely. After millions of years, the Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest had been mostly excavated by the dragons. The Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest had not appeared in the 10,000 Dragons starfield for tens of thousands of years. This time, they actually discovered the Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest at the same time. Of course, in order to prevent a greater war from destroying the 10,000 Dragons starfield, they had a rule. The Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest that were discovered in the starfield would belong to that starfield. For example, the Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Forest were discovered in the Naming region. Then, they would belong to the 650 planets in the Naming region. Each planet could send 10 people to explore the Starry Sky Forest and Starry Sky Deep Sea. How much benefit one could gain depended on one's ability. If a planet sent too many people, the government would intervene. After all, if there were too many people, the battle between them might cause the Starry Sky Forest and Starry Sky Deep Sea to collapse. Their battle might even spread to other planets and eventually become an interstellar war. At this moment, the government had already controlled the entrance to the Starry Sky Deep Sea and Starry Sky Deep Sea. This was to prevent a certain planet from sending too many people over. When Kong Hai received this news, he immediately organized a group of people, intending to visit the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea. He selected 10 fifth-grade ultra-evolved dragons from the planet. This was the best lineup he could choose at the moment. However, at this moment, Emosher sent him a video call. Just pick 9 people. Leave the last spot for me. Kong Hai shook his head. No. Teacher Emo, you might not know this, but every time we discover the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea, it's basically a small-scale war. Moreover, this war was very cruel. If you go, it will be too dangerous. Emosher couldn't help but laugh. They should be the ones who are dangerous. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just leave me a spot. I promise I'll get the Starry Sky Deep Sea back for you. Kong Hai paused for a moment. The cultivation resources in the Starry Sky Deep Sea and the Starry Sky Forest were extremely rich. If he could really take them back, then the strength of Cloud Sea Planet would increase by several times or even dozens of times. This was something he couldn't ask for more. After hesitating for a moment, he finally spoke. Teacher Emo, if we can guarantee your safety and take either the Starry Sky Deep Sea or the Starry Sky Forest, that would naturally be the best. Emosher smiled. Not just one but both of them. I'll snatch them back for you. Kong Hai was overjoyed when he heard this. That would be great. However, Teacher Emo, is your personal safety really not a problem? Emosher smiled. Even Myriad Poison Planet can't do anything to me, let alone the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea. Kong Hai was slightly relieved when he heard this. That would be great. Teacher Emo, if you need anything, just tell me. I will definitely get it done. Emosher shook his head. I don't need anything else. Just leave me a spot. Kong Hai nodded heavily. Don't worry, Teacher Emo. 2 days later, Emosher set off with the 9 4th-grade super-evolved dragons. In all honesty, 4th-grade super-evolved dragons weren't that strong in the entire Southern Star region. It was said that on the main planet of the Southern Star region, their Star Master was already a 7th-grade super-evolved dragon. On their planet, there were probably around 10 6th-grade super-evolved dragons. However, there was nothing they could do. Cloud Sea Planet was the most remote planet in the Southern Star region. They only had this much power. The 9 4th-grade super-evolved dragons didn't have much confidence in themselves. However, even if they didn't, they still had to go. After all, this was the Star Master's order. On the spaceship headed for the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea, Emoshur taught the 9 people the first and second dragon transformations. After these 10 days, these 9 people would become his strongest disciples. When that happened, any dragon they killed would be counted as his dragon slaying points. They flew for 2 hours, crossed 2 caterpillar bridges, and flew for another 10 hours before arriving near the Starry Sky Deep Sea and the Starry Sky Forest. In the past, the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were discovered separately. However, this time they discovered that the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea were paired. The entrances to the Starry Sky Forest and the Starry Sky Deep Sea didn't look very big. They were 2 black holes with a diameter of 10 meters. The 2 black holes were only 100 meters apart. There were 50 people guarding each side of the black holes. These 50 people were all wearing official dark matter armor. It was said that this dark matter armor contained extremely powerful energy. It could also absorb external energy. Wearing this dark matter armor would allow them to challenge enemies 2 grades above them. Moreover, this dark matter armor also used nanotechnology. It could freely change its form and wouldn't affect their transformation into dragon form. Of course, the cost of making this dark matter armor was also terrifying. The cost of making a dark matter armor was hundreds of millions of dragon coins. Moreover, you couldn't buy it even if you had the money. That was because creating this armor required dark matter organ. The only dark matter ore that had been discovered so far was controlled by the government. Emoshur asked them about it. The black hole on the left belonged to the Starry Sky Forest, while the one on the right belonged to the Starry Sky Deep Sea. After some consideration, he decided to go to the Starry Sky Forest first. Chapter 651. The cave on the left was the Starry Forest, while the cave on the right was the Starry Sea. Emoshur intended to go to the Starry Forest on the left first. Over 100 starry forests had been discovered over the past tens of thousands of years. However, no 2 starry forests were the same. Some starry forests were filled with blades and phantoms. Some starry forests were filled with the sun and moon, and the air was clear. Of course, this was only on the surface. All starry forests were different, but they all had one thing in common. They were all equally dangerous. Every time a starry forest was discovered, there would be at least 2,000 to 3,000 dragons entering, and at most 600 to 500 dragons entering. Less than 50% of these dragons would survive. However, if the casualty rate was so high, why were the dragons still fighting to enter the Starry Forest? That was because the discovery of ancient dragon ruins in the Starry Forest was of great significance to the entire planet. It was also a chance to change the fate of the dragons who discovered the ancient dragon ruins. Many of these dragons were not living the life they wanted. Even though they had reached grade 7 or grade 8, there were still many things that didn't go their way. That was why they wanted to change their fate by entering the Starry Forest and discovering the ancient dragon ruins. Of course, there were also some dragons who didn't want to live in the first place. They simply wanted to die. Wang Yi led the 9 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons and entered the Starry Forest through the left tunnel. After entering the tunnel, they realized that the tunnel wasn't as narrow as it appeared to be. In fact, if you walked more than 10 meters into the passage, you would feel that it was wide open. How was this a tunnel? It was clearly a massive rift, as if it were some sort of spatial rift. They kept walking forward along the spatial rift. There was no light source here, and they couldn't even see their fingers in front of them. Even Emoshur's perception seemed to be useless in this place. There seemed to be no concept of time here. No matter where you walked, there was only eternal darkness around you. They walked along this dark tunnel for an unknown amount of time. Suddenly, a light appeared in the distance. Emoshur led the 9 4th-grade hyperpolarizing dragons and sprinted in the direction of the light. However, even though the light didn't seem to be far away, it felt like it would take forever to reach it. Emoshur had no choice but to use teleportation. With his current ability, teleporting with 9 people would not be a problem, but the teleportation distance would be slightly shorter. Every time he teleported, he could only teleport 5,000 kilometers. After teleporting 7 times, the light finally became brighter and brighter. After teleporting 3 more times, the light became blinding. When he teleported for the 11th time, the scene in front of him changed again. The surrounding darkness had completely disappeared without a trace. This was a bright world. Green trees, green mountains, lush forests, and a sparkling sea. From the looks of it, this place seemed to be a paradise. Anyone who saw it couldn't help but want to stay here forever. However, no one dared to let their guard down. After all, no one knew what would happen in this strange world. Emosher had been using his draconic will to scan the surroundings. According to his investigation, this world did not seem to be as dangerous as he had imagined. Within a radius of 1,000 kilometers, other than the mountains and forests, there were many small animals. These animals were not large in size. Some were the size of rabbits, while the largest was only the size of a cow. Moreover, these animals did not seem to be aggressive at all. Even when Emosher used his draconic will to scan their bodies, he could not find any hidden claws or fangs. It seemed like all the animals here were herbivores. Apart from these animals, Emosher could not find anything else. As for the ruins of ancient dragons, there wasn't even a shadow of them. After searching for more than 3 hours, they finally found 10 giant dragons. Emosher had stolen the memories of these dragons and knew that they came from Centaurus. They were all 6th-grade ultra-evolved individuals. They had arrived here 72 hours ago, yet they had not found anything after staying here for 72 hours. If there was anything different about this place, it would be that the daytime here was much longer than on other planets. It had been 72 hours since they arrived, yet it was still daytime here. The sun in the sky also seemed to be moving very slowly. At this speed, it would probably take another 240 hours for the sun to set. However, there were all sorts of strange things in this vast universe. It was very common for planets to have a few dozen or even a few hundred hours of daylight. Emosher had no intention of running into these people. He deliberately avoided the position of these people and flew towards the east. Well, in fact, Emosher did not know where he was. Here, the sun seemed to be hanging high in the middle of the sky, and it was impossible to distinguish north from south. Moreover, he did not know if this world originally had 4 cardinal directions. After 20 hours, they found another 4 or 5 waves of dragons. Some of them had been here for a few days, while the longest had been here for half a month. Even though it looked like they had only been here for a few hours to the outside world, they felt like they had been here for months here. In other words, there was some sort of dynamic force that had accelerated time here. However, even though time had accelerated, the sun was moving very slowly. It was obvious how slow the sun was moving in this world. Emosher plundered each and every one of their memories, but he still didn't find anything. In all of their memories, this world was always like this and it was always so peaceful. However, this made Emosher feel more and more strange. What made him feel strange was not only that this world seemed to be always so peaceful, but also that these people were indifferent to this strangeness. This world had always been so peaceful, which was very strange, but they did not care about this strangeness at all. It was as if everything was supposed to be like this. This made Emosher feel even more strange. Emosher tried to steal the memories of the 9 level 4 super-evolved dragons that he had brought with him, but found that they were also indifferent to this strangeness. This made Emosher even more careful. He did not know how long he had been here, but he had seen at least 30 waves of dragons. Everything seemed to have always been so peaceful. However, at a certain moment, this peaceful world was broken. The seemingly eternal sun in the sky suddenly fell at an extremely fast speed. It quickly fell behind the mountain in the distance. At the same time, a bright moon rose. This bright moon was 100 times larger than the sun. Chapter 652. The dragons could sense that the sun had been hanging in the sky for several months now. Yet now it was falling at an unbelievable speed. After the sun fell, a huge round moon slowly rose in the sky in less than 5 minutes. This massive moon was dark red in color. At first, it only revealed a small part of its face like the sun. However, as it rose higher, the dragons began to realize its true form. It rose higher and grew larger and larger. In fact, they couldn't even see its full appearance. All they could see was the fat part of its body that resembled the belly of a giant worm. It hung in the sky like a giant's eye peering down at the earth, causing all the dragons to feel an inexplicable sense of fear. At this moment, everyone who had entered the starry forest lifted their heads to look at this strange phenomenon in the sky in fear. This situation lasted for 10 minutes. These dragons felt a sense of pressure from the bottom of their hearts as they looked at this massive sphere. It was so oppressive that they almost couldn't breathe. All of a sudden, something unexpected happened once again. The massive sphere in the sky suddenly fell toward the ground. Rumble, rumble, rumble. As the sphere fell, rumbling sounds could be heard in the distance. The earth also started to tremble violently. All the dragons fled in all directions in panic. However, with such a huge sphere crashing down from the sky, where could you escape to? Rumble. Rumble. As the sphere fell to the ground, the radius of the explosion grew larger and larger. At first, only the bottom of the sphere was in contact with the ground. However, the radius of the explosion was increasing at a terrifying rate. The dragons within the radius of the explosion were devoured by the explosion without being able to put up any resistance. Some of the dragons used spatial escape methods. However, their spatial escape methods could only allow them to escape for a few thousand kilometers. However, the radius of the explosion was millions or even tens of millions of kilometers. Emosher's heart skipped a beat when he saw this. The expressions of the 9 fourth-grade ultra-evolved dragons changed drastically. They had anticipated all sorts of dangers before coming here, but they had never expected such an apocalypse. In their terror, they subconsciously turned to look at Emosher. Emosher was the strongest among them. If there was anyone who could save their lives, it would be Emosher. In fact, Emosher wasn't sure if he could save them at this moment. The only thing he could do was to bring all the dragons into Earth space. With a thought, he brought himself and the 9 dragons into Earth space. He had just brought all the dragons into Earth space, and the next moment the place where they had been was crushed by the huge sphere in the sky. The surroundings were instantly engulfed in a sea of fire. The 9 dragons, who had yet to recover from their shock, looked around in disbelief. They looked at Emosher in surprise when they saw that their surroundings were calm and peaceful, and that they were in a completely different world from before. Instructor Emo, that was... Emosher shook his head. I'm not sure what that thing was. I just brought you guys into this space to avoid that apocalyptic disaster. It seems that we can avoid that disaster in this space. Earth's space belonged to another space that was independent of this universe. Therefore, it was not affected by the outside world. The level 4 super-evolved dragons were all relieved when they heard that their lives were not in danger. However, they still had lingering fears about what they had just experienced. I've read a lot of information about the Starry Sky Forest before, but I've never seen such a Starry Sky Forest. It's too scary. It's like the end of the world in this Starry Sky Forest. The other dragons that came in probably couldn't have escaped death. While the super-evolved dragons were discussing, Emosher had already probed with his dragon's telekinesis. As he probed with his dragon's telekinesis, the outside world had already turned into a sea of fire. The huge celestial body had already disappeared, and the entire world seemed to have been destroyed. There was no longer any life in that world. Emosher was also secretly shocked. He had thought that he was already very powerful since he had become a level 8 super-evolved dragon and mastered all kinds of 9 dragon transformations at the same time. However, compared to such a disaster, he was like a small boat in a storm or a candle in a storm. He was so insignificant. After a while, he had created 100 doppelgangers. He let these doppelgangers go to the outside world to investigate. The 9 super-evolved dragons looked at Emosher and the 100 doppelgangers and were all shocked. Some of them could create doppelgangers, but none of them could create so many doppelgangers. Moreover, these doppelgangers were much stronger than them. This made them revere Emosher even more in their hearts. Seeing Emosher's doppelgangers disappear into the air, they started to observe the world again. Some of them also had their own space, but it was far from being as big as this space. Their space was just a pitch-black storage space. However, Teacher Mo's space looked like a world of its own. There were mountains, water, animals, plants, the sky, and the earth. Compared to Teacher Mo's space, their space was like a child's toy. The doppelgangers that Emosher sent out to investigate the outside world. That huge sphere had long since disappeared. There was only a huge crater with a diameter of several million kilometers left on the ground. There was only charred black in the huge crater. Although the destruction around the huge crater was not so serious, not even a blade of grass grew. The river from before had dried up. The forest from before had turned into a thick layer of black ash. The mountains from before had been flattened. As for the dragons from before, they had naturally disappeared. This world was so quiet that it was a little scary. There was not even a trace of wind. In the sky, the pale white sun hung there once again, motionless. When Emosher's doppelgangers used dragon thoughts to investigate the surroundings, they found that there was no danger in this world. Emosher furrowed his brows and pondered for a moment before leading the 9 Type 4 super-evolved dragons to the outside world. When the super-evolved dragons saw that the world had turned into hell, they were all dumbfounded. At the same time, they were secretly glad. Fortunately, Instructor Emo had brought them into that space just now. Otherwise, they would definitely die if they stayed in this world. Chapter 653. At this time, in this dead and scorched world, the pale white sun in the sky was hanging there motionlessly. Before, Emosher and the others didn't feel that this sun was abnormal. But after what happened just now, the more they looked at it, the more they felt that this sun was strange. It seemed to be hanging there motionlessly forever, which always made people feel uneasy. Emosher and the other 10 people began to explore this world again. Emosher's clones had flashed thousands of kilometers away at this time. However, in the clones' exploration, all the surrounding places were scorched black, without any vitality. Just like this, they explored for many hours. In his exploration, more than 30 waves of dragons appeared. From the memories of these dragons, he knew that these dragons had just come in. Of course, in the eyes of these dragons, they might have been here for a few days or months, but when they came in, this was already a scorched world, so they should have come in before the planet fell. Emosher ignored them and continued to explore. At this time, the sun in the sky began to fall rapidly again. Those dragons still didn't know what was going to happen, but Emosher had already planned to bring the dragons around him into Earth's space. Sure enough, when the sun fell rapidly, a strange scene happened. Although the sun had set, the sky was very bright, unusually bright, even brighter than when the sun was hanging in the sky. Gradually, those dragons found that there was a focus in the bright sky, and that focus was getting closer and closer. Or it could be said that that thing was falling to the ground. This time, Emosher took those dragons to hide in his Earth space early, and at the same time he kept exploring the outside with Dragon's thought. Soon that thing had fallen to the ground, but this time it didn't explode as soon as it came in contact with the ground like before. That thing was like a crystal with 2 pyramids at both ends. It was about 10 kilometers long, and the most protruding part was about 5,000 meters. It plunged into the ground diagonally, and the other end was only about 5 kilometers above the ground. It was quietly plunged into the ground, and other than that, nothing strange happened. Those dragons were very surprised. They all gathered around and looked at the huge pyramid that was more than 5 kilometers long. Out of curiosity, someone reached out to touch the pyramid. However, the moment he touched the pyramid, he heard a few cracking sounds coming from his body. Then his entire body was frozen into an ice sculpture. The other dragons around were all shocked when they saw this. "Don't touch it." A slightly older dragon quickly roared, and the other dragons all took a few steps back. However, in the next moment, poof, a crystal-like vine suddenly protruded from a dragon's feet. The vine instantly pierced his thigh, and the next moment, his entire body turned into ice crystals. Then puff 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 puff, terrifying sounds rang out one after another. Dragons were constantly pierced by the crystal vines and turned into ice sculptures. In just a few seconds, more than 20 dragons were turned into ice sculptures. Seeing this, the other dragons hurriedly flew into the sky. But at that moment, tree vines extended from the ice sculptures of the dragons. These crystal-like vines quickly rose and grew larger. In just a few minutes, they turned into a few towering ice trees. And these ice trees quickly multiplied and grew. In more than 20 minutes, countless ice trees grew within a radius of thousands of kilometers. So the temperature began to plummet. Looking around, the entire world had been covered in ice crystals. All the dragons who were lucky enough to escape before could no longer escape at this time. There was a world of ice and snow everywhere. Where could you escape to? Under the effect of the ice crystal trees, the temperature of the world dropped extremely low. Even those dragons could not withstand it. Some of them were wearing armor. Some were of the fire attribute. Some dragons were of the ice attribute and were immune to the ice attribute. However, it was useless. It seemed that all means were useless under the effect of the ice crystals that covered the entire world. Even if some escaped into their space, they found that their space had been frozen and exploded. In the end, all the dragons were turned into ice sculptures again. The 9 super-evolved dragons in Earth space were all frightened when they saw this scene. They could not help but look at the space around them. However, the space around them seemed to be very solid. There was no sign of it being frozen and cracked at all. "Instructor Mo, are we safe here?" One of the dragons could not help but ask. "Of course." Emosher replied calmly. These people were relieved. At the same time, they admired Emosher even more. In a situation where the outside world seemed to be destroyed, the other spaces were useless. However, Instructor Mo's space was safe and sound. This was really unbelievable. Next, various unbelievable natural disasters kept happening in the starry sky forest. Earth fire that could even burn the sky red. floods that drown the entire world, mountain winds that could uproot huge trees, thunderstorm clouds that split the earth and covered the entire world. In short, there were all kinds of disasters here. In these disasters, there were at least 1,000 dragons that died. Emosure, on the other hand, could always escape unscathed by relying on his Earth space. After countless disasters, the entire world finally became peaceful. No more disasters happened. Looking around, this world that had experienced all kinds of disasters was full of huge pits. Emosure led the 9 dragons in search of possible ancient dragon ruins in such a world. After walking for a long time, they seemed to have reached the end of the world. At this point, there were no more huge pits on the ground. Instead, it was very flat and endless. The strange white sun that seemed to never change in the sky finally did not appear again. Looking around, the world seemed to be the same color. It was the same chaotic color. In this chaotic sky, a dragon appeared. However, to Emosure's surprise, it was not a Western dragon. It was an Eastern divine dragon. This divine dragon was bigger than any dragon that Emosure had ever seen or imagined. Emosure could only see its head but not its tail. In fact, he couldn't even detect it with probing. With Emosure's current dragon consciousness, he could detect tens of thousands of kilometers away. However, he could not detect its tail. This showed that its body was more than tens of thousands of kilometers long. Just one eye alone had a diameter of tens of kilometers. Chapter 654. In the dead silence of the entire world, Wang Yi and the 9 rank 4 super-evolved dragons had been teleporting for an unknown amount of time. Finally, they came to a strange world. The sky and earth were the same. Looking around, they couldn't see anything else. The entire world seemed to be infinitely large but also infinitely distant and empty. There was no sun but they could see anything clearly. However, there was nothing here at all. There was no sun, no stars, no living creatures or things. There was only the vast sky and the vast earth. After walking here for an unknown amount of time, finally, something new appeared in front of them. This was an Eastern divine dragon. They didn't know how long or how big it was. Its eyeball was tens of kilometers in diameter. The entire dragon body was translucent, as if it was carved out of crystal. The scales, claws, and teeth on the dragon's body were all visible. Seeing such a behemoth, the 9 Type 4 super-evolved dragons were all terrified. This was the first time they had seen such a huge creature in their lives. They had heard of the giant astral beast before. However, no one had seen what a giant astral beast looked like. And now, this creature really existed in front of them. Energy surged in the 9 people's bodies and they were on high alert. What is this thing? Instructor Emo Instructor Emo? They subconsciously looked at Emosure. In this world they felt that every step was dangerous. And every time there was danger, it was Emosure who helped them resolve it. So now that such a huge unknown creature had appeared in front of them, they naturally pinned their hopes on Emosure. At this time, although Emosure was also shocked, fear was only a small part of it. More than that, he was surprised. It was hard for him to imagine that in a world full of dragons, a creature from ancient Wuxia myths would suddenly appear. Divine dragon. This had a huge impact on his worldview. And from what he knew, the size of a divine dragon was limited. How could it be so big? Could it really be as small as an earthworm and as big as a mountain just like in the myths and legends? Don't panic. Emosure said to the 9 dragons. Once there was danger, he could instantly bring these 9 dragons into Earth space. However, they waited here for more than half an hour, but the divine dragon didn't move at all, and stared at them without moving. Everyone felt numb from being stared at. They suspected that it was just a huge statue, but no matter where they went, the huge statue kept staring at them. It was as if he could see right through their hearts. In this vast world, this huge divine dragon, whose head and tail were nowhere to be seen, gave everyone a huge sense of oppression. It was unknown how long the situation lasted. Suddenly, one of the 9 super-evolved giant dragons behind Emosure let out a roar that sounded like a pig being slaughtered. Ah! Emosure quickly turned around and saw that his right arm had turned into a sharp blade and pierced through the head of another super-evolved giant dragon. The super-evolved dragon's head fell to the sides like a watermelon that had been cut in half. All of the dragons were shocked. He's crazy. What's going on? It was fine, but now. Why did you suddenly attack? Everyone was shocked and terrified. Just as they were terrified, they saw that the super-evolved giant dragon who had killed someone actually raised his sharp blade and pierced it through his chin and out the top of his head. Everyone looked at all of this in disbelief. That guy must have gone crazy. He must have been unable to withstand the huge pressure here. This place is really too strange, too oppressive, so oppressive that it's driving him crazy. Hearing these two giant dragons say this, the other giant dragons became even more nervous. Indeed, facing a certain kind of extremely stressful environment for a long time could really drive people crazy. After the initial panic, the giant dragons gradually calmed down. However, this calmness didn't last long. Just more than half an hour later, another giant dragon directly transformed into a sharp claw and pierced it into his own eye. This caused everyone to panic once again. Emosher knew that there must be something fishy about this. He immediately brought the remaining 6 giant dragons into Earth space. When he explored the outside from Earth space, he found that it was still a vast expanse. In the vast expanse of heaven and earth, there was a huge divine dragon. Emosher tried to create doppelgangers to go to the divine dragon's location. However, without exception, these doppelgangers all committed suicide when they were more than 50 kilometers away from the divine dragon. From what these doppelgangers felt, Emosher knew that they seemed to have been affected by some kind of psychological suggestion. Emosher couldn't help but think, dragon psyche attack? He then thought of the various natural disasters from before. Planets falling, freezing, floods, fires, and so on. Emosher became more and more certain of his thoughts. How could a planet suffer so many natural disasters in such a short period of time? The only explanation was that it was a dragon psyche attack. In other words, another dragon psyche had created such an illusion. Thinking of this, Emosher's heart suddenly became clear. From the moment they entered this place until now, they had actually been in an illusion all along. However, at the same time, Emosher was greatly shocked. To be able to create so many large illusions, the opponent's dragon psyche must be very powerful. At least with Emosher's current demonic psyche, it was impossible for him to create so many illusions in the consciousness of so many people. However, now that he realized that this was an illusion, it would be very difficult for the opponent to use illusions to confuse him. Thinking of this, Emosher's mind moved, and he arrived outside Earth's space. Sure enough, the scene he saw now was completely different from before. He saw that he was still surrounded by green mountains and clear waters. The forest was lush and there weren't any large creatures in the forest. There were only some very gentle and small movements. It was exactly the same as the scene he saw when he first came in. At this time a voice sounded, Did you see through my illusion? That voice didn't come from a certain direction, but from all directions. When Emosher looked up, he saw that in the blue sky, some translucent things were gradually gathering together. As time went out of balance, those translucent things gradually converged into the shape of a divine dragon. It was almost exactly the same as the divine dragon that he saw before, whose head and tail could not be seen. However, in terms of size, it was much smaller than that divine dragon. This translucent divine dragon was only about 50 kilometers long. Well, this was actually already very big. There was one difference between it and the previous huge divine dragon, which was that this divine dragon was alive. It meandered in the air. Sometimes it soared into the sky, sometimes it dove down, sometimes it circled twice. Chapter 655. The huge transparent divine dragon stretched for dozens of kilometers and kept circling in the sky. Occasionally, it would let out a dragon roar that resounded throughout the world. If the divine dragon that could not be seen previously gave people a huge sense of oppression, this living divine dragon gave people a real deterrent force. Its eyes were bright, especially when it looked at Emosher. Emosher's heart could not help but tremble. You're a divine dragon? Emosher said these words in extreme shock. Divine dragon? The divine dragon found it a little funny. What the hell is that? Then, you are ancestral dragon. The winding divine dragon gave the answer. Ancestral dragon? Emosher was very surprised. He had heard of the concept of ancestral dragon before. Above the super-evolved colossal dragon was the ancient colossal dragon. Above the ancient colossal dragon was the immemorial ancestral dragon. However, he did not expect this guy in front of him to say that he was an ancestral dragon. If the super-evolved colossal dragon could continue to evolve endlessly, it could eventually evolve into an ancestral dragon like the Eastern Divine Dragon? Ancestral dragon? Immemorial ancestral dragon? Emosher felt that his question was a little awkward. Shouldn't he have asked more profound and philosophical questions? However, seeing a living divine dragon in front of him, his thoughts could not help but freeze. He could only ask such an idiotic question. What immemorial ancestral dragon? I don't understand. However, after waiting for millions of years, a kid like you has finally appeared. If your dragon psyche can be so strong, then your brain can definitely withstand my ancestral dragon soul. Very well, it's you. When Emosher heard that, he immediately knew that things were not going well. This guy seemed to want to harm him. I've been here for millions of years and I've been choosing the right person. Those illusions that I created were to choose the right person. The colossal dragons that died in those illusions were useless trash. Only the colossal dragons that can survive my illusions have strong enough dragon psyche to prevent their brains from collapsing when my ancestral dragon soul invades their brains. F***ck. Emosher could not help but curse in his heart. It turned out that this guy wanted to invade his brain. Possession? Emosher asked. Hee little guy, you're pretty smart. It's a pity that your body will soon belong to me. With that, the huge transparent dragon flew towards Emosher. At this moment, he saw the scene he saw when he was injected with the genetic drug at the Earth base. The huge dragon opened its cave-like mouth and flew towards him. The only difference was that the dragon he had seen before was a Western dragon. This time, however, it was an Eastern dragon that was trying to devour him. To be exact, it was the soul of an Eastern divine dragon. The dragon soul swallowed Emosher in an instant. However, from an outsider's point of view, it didn't look like the dragon had swallowed Emosher. Instead, it had drilled into Emosher's head. In Emosher's mind, the ancestral Gragon laughed maniacally. Ah, that's the feeling. Only such a strong brain can withstand my dragon soul. Then, his dragon soul quickly tried to devour Emosher's dragon consciousness. However, in the next moment he suddenly screamed in horror, "Wait, how can your dragon consciousness devour my dragon soul?" When he was about to devour Emosher's dragon consciousness, he realized that not only was his dragon soul unable to devour Emosher's dragon consciousness, but it was also being devoured by Emosher's dragon consciousness. This made him extremely shocked. As the ancestral Gragon, his dragon soul was extremely huge. His dragon soul could transform into a divine dragon that was dozens of kilometers long and maintain it for millions of years without any changes. This was enough to show how powerful his dragon soul was. It could be said that Emosher's dragon consciousness was like a candle in the wind or a lonely boat in the sea in front of his dragon soul. It couldn't be any easier for him to devour Emosher's dragon consciousness. However, in reality he couldn't devour Emosher's dragon consciousness at all. Instead, it was Emosher's dragon consciousness that was devouring his dragon soul. However, although he was terrified, he still didn't want to give up. He had waited millions of years for such a powerful dragon consciousness to appear. If it were any other giant dragon, their dragon consciousness wouldn't be so strong, and their brains wouldn't be so tough. They wouldn't be able to withstand his dragon soul at all. Although his dragon soul could exist for almost eternity, he could only stay in this world. He could only leave by borrowing the bodies of other giant dragons. He had stayed here for millions of years. He had stayed here for long enough. He wanted to leave. He must take this guy's soul and leave. Therefore, he didn't escape immediately. Instead, he continued to try to devour Emosher's dragon consciousness. He didn't believe that he couldn't devour this guy's dragon soul. However, the more he tried, the more terrified he became. No matter what method he used, no matter how powerful his devouring skill was, he couldn't devour Emosher's dragon consciousness at all. Instead, his dragon soul was being devoured by Emosher rapidly. After about half an hour, Emosher had already devoured 1/10,000th of his dragon soul. Even so, he still didn't give up. After trying for dozens of days, Emosher had already devoured 1/10,000th of his dragon soul. After trying for more than a month, when Emosher had devoured 1/100th of his dragon soul, he finally panicked. If this continued, he would eventually be devoured by this little guy. Therefore, he hurriedly tried to escape from Emosher's brain. However, he soon discovered in horror that Emosher's brain was like an extremely tough barrier, or rather, a prison. It was easy for his dragon soul to enter, but it was extremely difficult for him to leave. He used almost every method to escape. He even wanted to destroy Emosher's physical body to escape, but he couldn't do it. He begged Emosher, begging Emosher to let him go. He promised Emosher great benefits, allowing Emosher to coexist with his dragon soul in his brain. He also threatened Emosher that if he devoured him, the other 11 ancestral dragons would come back to take revenge on Emosher. In short, all the good words were said and all the threatening words were also said, but Emosher remained indifferent. It had been constantly devouring his dragon soul. In fact, Mosher had no choice. One of Mosher's skills was called Dragon Will Devour. A dragon's soul was also a dragon's will, but it was tens of thousands of times larger than an ordinary dragon's will. When a dragon's will was strong to a certain extent, it was called a dragon soul. Therefore, when that guy wanted to devour Mosher's dragon's will, Mosher's Dragon Will Devour was activated, and it instantly devoured him. It was impossible to stop this skill once it was activated. At the same time, after this skill was activated, Mosher's brain was like a huge prison. It was easy to enter but impossible to leave. After about 8 years, his dragon soul was finally completely devoured by Mosher. Chapter 656. The dragon soul of the ancestral dragon was simply too massive. Mosher had to spend 8 years to completely devour it. During these 8 years, Mosher did not eat, drink, move, or shake. The only thing he did every day was devour, devour, and devour without stopping. The 9 Grade 4 super-evolved dragons were getting impatient from waiting in Earth space. They sneaked out to investigate. In the end, they only saw Mosher sitting cross-legged in the vast space, unmoving. No matter how they called out, there was no response. This made them wonder if Mosher was dead. However, when they went to investigate, they found that Mosher was still breathing. When they went to listen, Mosher's heart was still beating. At this moment, Mosher seemed to have entered a state of cultivation. However, this state of cultivation was deeper than that of ordinary dragons. Generally, even if a dragon was cultivating, it would respond to someone's call. However, Mosher didn't respond at all. Happy and Emma were also very worried. They personally came out to check on Mosher's physical condition. The Grade 4 super-evolved dragons were very surprised when they saw Happy and Emma. They did not expect there to be others in Earth space. Humans. However, when they heard Emma's self-introduction and knew that Happy was Mosher's woman, they hurriedly lowered their eyes. They did not even dare to look straight at her. They had seen Mosher's power. In the face of the natural disaster that all super-evolved dragons could not avoid, Mosher had brought them to Earth space and easily avoided the disaster. It was obvious how powerful Mosher was. Naturally, they only had respect for Mosher's woman. At the same time, they thought to themselves that only a woman like this was worthy of Instructor Mo. After checking on Mosher's physical condition, Emma nodded at Happy. She meant that there was no problem. Happy also took a closer look and found that Mosher's breathing and heartbeat were normal. Only then did he feel relieved. After that, these people came to observe Mosher's movements every day. In fact, 3 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons would stand guard around Mosher every day to prevent any other dangers. In the beginning, they didn't feel anything was wrong. But gradually, 1 month passed and then half a year passed. Mosher was still cultivating without moving. This surprised them. No dragon could cultivate for half a year without moving. Even the level 7 or level 8 super-evolved dragons would have to move once or twice a month. However, Emma knew Mosher very well. He knew that Mosher would often do some unexpected things. He also knew that Mosher wasn't cultivating right now. As far as he knew, Mosher had never cultivated before. And now Mosher was sitting there motionlessly. It was very likely that it had something to do with Mosher's dragon will. However, she didn't know what the relationship was. She could only instruct those super-evolved giant dragons not to touch Mosher, and at the same time continue to protect Mosher. This protection lasted for 8 years. 8 years later, on a certain day, those super-evolved dragons were still protecting him as usual. Although 8 years was a long time, dragons had a long lifespan. Especially for super-evolved dragons, their lifespan had reached tens of thousands of years or even hundreds of thousands of years. Therefore, 8 years was nothing to them. At this moment, Mosher silently opened his eyes. He looked at the 3 super-evolved dragons and asked, "How long has it been?" His voice wasn't loud, but it gave the 3 super-evolved dragons a fright. They hurriedly turned to look at Mosher, only to see that Mosher had opened his eyes and was looking at them. 8 years, Instructor Mo, one of the super-evolved dragons replied. Mosher nodded, "Thank you for your hard work." He then slowly stood up. He had been sitting cross-legged for 8 years. However, when he stood up, his movements weren't stiff at all. It was almost as if he had just sat down. After standing up, he glanced at the vast land. It had been 8 years, but there hadn't been any changes. He knew that in the endless years to come, there wouldn't be any changes. This was also the reason why the ancestral dragon wanted to leave this place. Since the existence of dragons in the universe, The first dragon was the ancestor of all dragons, known as the dragon ancestor. The dragon group used his bloodline to create the 12 ancestral dragons. The bloodline of the 12 ancestral dragons was mixed with various other creatures, giving birth to many creatures with dragon bloodline. That was why there were various other dragons. In fact, the creatures with the purest dragon bloodline in the universe were only the 12 ancestral dragons and the one and only dragon ancestor. The ancestral dragon that Emoshur devoured was besieged by the other ancestral dragons because of his bloodthirsty nature. However, they only managed to destroy his body. As for his dragon soul, it was difficult to destroy it. Hence, they locked the dragon soul in the star forest. If the dragon soul wanted to leave the star forest, the only way was to seize another dragon's body and refine it into the ancestral dragon's body. However, in this universe, the dragon's dragon consciousness had become very weak. There wasn't a single dragon's dragon consciousness that could meet this requirement. They never expected that Emoshur's dragon consciousness would meet this requirement. However, what was even more unexpected was that the ancestral dragon's dragon soul didn't devour Emoshur's dragon imitation. Instead, it was devoured by Emoshur's dragon consciousness. Now, Emoshur's dragon consciousness was no longer a dragon consciousness. Instead, it was a dragon soul. In this realm, the dragon soul was the core. As for the body, it was just a shell. As long as there was a dragon soul, one would be immortal. At the same time, if the dragon soul could find a suitable body, it would be invincible in the universe. Right now, Emoshur's own body was the most suitable one for him. According to the ancestral dragon's memories, he only needed 10,000 years to refine his body into the ancestral dragon's body. The ancestral dragon's body was truly invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire. Only other ancestral dragons could destroy the ancestral dragon's body. In other words, after Emoshur refined his body into the real ancestral dragon's body, only the other 11 ancestral dragons could hurt him. As for the 1,000-dragon ancestor, after using his bloodline to create the 12 ancestral dragons, his bloodline was exhausted and he disappeared from the universe. Perhaps after billions of years, his dragon body had turned into space dust or a planet. No one knew. In short, the most important thing for Emoshur now was to refine his body into the ancestral dragon's body as soon as possible. 10,000 years might be a long time for other dragons, but it didn't exist for Emoshur. With a thought, he arrived on Earth. Chapter 657. Emoshur entered Earth space and accelerated time. 10,000 years passed within a minute. In these 10,000 years, he used the cultivation method in the ancestral dragon's memory to train his dragon body. In these 10,000 years, he raised his body from a rank 8 super-evolved dragon to the ancestral dragon realm. When he reached the ancestral dragon realm, he realized that there were other realms above the super-evolved dragon. After reaching rank 10 super-evolved dragon, the next realm was the ancient dragon realm. The ancient WRMS continued to cultivate. Reaching rank 10 ancient WRMS was their limit. It was basically impossible for him to advance any further. There was only one way, and that was to devour the dragon soul of the ancient dragon realm. In other words, if one wanted to cultivate to the ancient dragon realm, they would have to exchange all the dragon souls of another ancient dragon realm. Therefore, no matter how talented a dragon was, it was impossible for them to cultivate to the ancient dragon realm. Emoshur was lucky to have the system. Otherwise, he would have been taken over by the ancient dragon realm. Both Emoshur's body and soul had reached the level of a primordial ancestral dragon. In other words, he was 2 realms higher than the average super-evolved dragon. Previously, he was worried that there might be ancient dragons in the universe, so he kept a low profile. However, there was no need for that now. With a thought, he arrived outside Earth's space. The super-evolved dragons outside could not wait any longer. Only 6 of the 9 super-evolved dragons were left. This was because 3 of them had been killed in the illusion. Emoshur then led these people out of the starry sky forest. 8 years had passed. Emoshur thought that the starry sky and deep sea had disappeared. He did not expect the starry sky and deep sea to still be there. Since the starry sky and deep sea were still there, he might as well make a trip there. The official soldiers guarding the entrance to the starry sky and deep sea shook their heads when they saw Emoshur and the others about to enter the starry sky and deep sea. It's been 8 years. Even if there were any treasures in the starry sky and deep sea, they would have been taken away by others. You won't find anything if you go in now. The higher-ups have already given the order. In 2 days, all the official soldiers will be evacuated. This place is already a ruin with no value. Emoshur did not care. He had devoured the memories of the ancestral dragon, so he was very familiar with this starry sea. This sea of stars was where the ancestral dragon originally resided. In this residence, the ancestral dragon's weapon was a weapon of mass destruction. Moreover, there were many inheritances of the ancestral dragon in this sea of stars. Obtaining these inheritances would allow a large number of ordinary creatures to cultivate to become super-evolved giant dragons. Emoshur planned to bring the legacy items to the Flaming Dawn continent and let the people in the base use them. Emoshur had the 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons wait outside the entrance. With a thought, he arrived at the deep sea of stars. The starry sky deep sea was an extremely large spherical sea. It was unknown how many tens of thousands of kilometers this sea stretched. It did not rely on any planets but floated alone in the universe like an extremely huge water droplet. There were thousands upon thousands of powerful creatures in this sea. Even the weakest of these creatures had the power of a 5th grade ultra-evolved dragon. Some of the more powerful ones had even reached grade 10 super-evolved dragons. Moreover, these creatures liked to live in groups. There were as few as 2 or 3 and as many as hundreds or thousands. Therefore, the ultra-evolved dragons that came here to explore had to be extremely cautious. Otherwise, they would become food for these creatures if they were not careful. As soon as Emoshur arrived, he detected that there were more than 70 powerful creatures of various kinds swimming towards him within a radius of 100 kilometers. Emoshur shook his head helplessly. With a thought, he transformed into the ancestral dragon that was 100 kilometers long. This ancestral dragon was almost identical to the dragon god in Chinese legends. He wriggled through the sea, causing massive waves to rise. Longway waves spread out. The creatures that thought they had found prey and were swimming towards him excitedly scattered and fled when they sensed the Longway waves. Emoshur didn't pay any attention to them. If it were 8 years ago, he might have played around with so many creatures after seeing them. However, his power was now 2 grades higher than theirs. He felt that playing with them was 2F** king meaningless. He wriggled and quickly swam deeper into the starry sea. He passed by a group of giant jellyfish along the way. These jellyfish had a radius of more than 10 kilometers. As far as the eye could see, they were all umbrella-shaped jellyfish. They were like giant light bulbs flashing in the sea. Even a grade 10 super-evolved dragon would evaporate in an instant in such a group of jellyfish. However, when they saw Emoshur, who had transformed into the ancestral dragon, they hurriedly fled in all directions as if they had seen the plague. Emoshur then passed through a cluster of underwater forests. These underwater forests were all made up of corals that were hundreds of meters tall. These corals were colorful and looked extremely beautiful, but they were all highly poisonous. Even a rank 56 super-evolved colossal dragon would be easily poisoned to death. After passing through the huge forest of corals, he arrived at the crater of a huge underwater volcano. This huge underwater volcano was still erupting. What it spewed out was not fiery red magma, but blue flames. He knew that these blue flames did not have any temperature, but as long as he came into contact with them, he would instantly be burned to ashes. From the crater of the volcano, about 100 kilometers down, there was blue lava. Emoshur plunged his head into the blue magma. He reckoned that even the ancient WRMS would have no choice but to retreat in the face of the blue lava. This blue lava could not only melt iron and stone, but it could also easily melt the hardest 10,000-year-old black iron in the universe. However, Emoshur swam his huge dragon body and entered the crater of the volcano. This was what it meant to be impervious to fire and water. The blue lava was hundreds of kilometers deep. However, for Emoshur, who was hundreds of kilometers long, it only took him a few seconds to pass through the lava. At this moment, a huge palace appeared below him. The entire palace looked like a naturally formed huge cave. This huge cave was tens of thousands of kilometers tall and had a radius of millions of kilometers. This huge cave was decorated in a grand and magnificent manner. Blue, green, and red fluorescent stones were embedded everywhere. There were also many tunnels in the surroundings that led to other smaller caves. Emoshur's eyes widened. This was the residence of the ancestral dragon? This cave alone was enough for everyone on Earth to live in. And it was more than enough. Chapter 658. Emoshur looked at the huge cave. The ancestral dragon's dragon soul scanned the surroundings and realized that the huge cave was hundreds of thousands or even millions of kilometers wide. It was hard to imagine that there would be such a huge cave. Such a huge cave was more than enough for all the people on Earth to live in. Emosher came to the center of the huge cave according to the ancestral dragon's dragon soul's memory. There was a circular pattern with a radius of thousands of kilometers in the center of the cave. This circular pattern was engraved with a very simple yet mysterious pattern. If an ordinary person looked at it, there would be nothing but the pattern. However, according to the ancestral dragon's dragon soul's memory, Emosher knew that there were thousands of ancestral dragons' inheritances hidden in the pattern. There were ancient memories, cultivation techniques, and even some weapons among the inheritances. These weapons were not made of metal or other materials. They were all energy. Once bound to the user's body, they could be nurtured by the user's body and eventually develop into the most suitable weapon for the user. Emosher's foot stepped on the center of the huge pattern. The next moment, spherical bubble-like spaces began to appear on the huge pattern. There were thousands of ancestral dragons' inheritances in these spaces. Emosher glanced at them. These spaces were different from the ones he had seen before. They should have been created by the ancestral dragon through some means. However, Emosher was too lazy to study them in detail at this time. With a thought, he kept the thousands of ancestral dragons' inheritances into his Earth space. The next moment, the huge circular pattern began to glow with white light. The light became brighter and brighter, and Emosher seemed to melt in the light. The next moment, the scene in front of him changed. He came to a dark cave. It turned out that the huge circular pattern was also a teleportation array. As long as Emosher activated it with the dragon soul, he could be teleported to this dark cave. The ancestral dragon's weapon was hidden in this dark cave. This cave was not as big as the previous one, but it was not small either. Its radius should be thousands of kilometers. It was thousands of kilometers from the top to the bottom. There was a huge mountain in the center of this 1,000-kilometer-wide cave. The mountain was connected to the top and bottom of the cave. It looked a little strange. Hundreds of thick chains were inserted into the mountain and the other ends were inserted into the walls of the cave. It looked as if it was trying to lock down the mountain. Emosher couldn't help but frown. According to the ancestral Gragon's memories, this mountain was his weapon. However, there were no such chains in the ancestral Gragon's memories. With a thought, he tried to summon the weapon in the mountain. The mountain peak was also trembling with his summons. The surrounding chains rattled from the vibrations, but the vibrations were too light. It was impossible for them to collapse the mountain. According to Emosher's memories, he understood. This ancestral dragon had done too much evil in the past and was subdued by the other 11 ancestral dragons. His body was destroyed and his dragon soul was poured into the starry sky forest. At the same time, his weapon was sealed in this mountain. It was impossible for Emosher to open the seal in a short period of time. The only way to open the weapon was to find the blood of the 11 ancestral dragons and drip it on the mountain. However, it had been 10,000 years. It was unknown if the 11 ancestral dragons were still around. Even if he could find the 11 ancestral dragons, it was also unknown if they would help him. He might not be the ancestral dragon from before, but who knew if they would believe him? Emosher tried all kinds of methods to destroy the mountain, but he realized that brute force would not work. With his current ability, he could easily destroy this huge cave, but the mountain peak would still stand tall and not fall. Helplessly, he could only give up on taking out the weapon. After all, with his current ability, he could do whatever he wanted in this universe even if he didn't use any weapons. As long as he didn't meet the 11 ancestral dragons, he was invincible in the universe. Thinking of this, Emosher shook his head. With a thought, he arrived at the entrance of the starry sky ocean. The 6 4th-grade super-evolved dragons were overjoyed when they saw Emosher arrive. "Instructor Emo, you're out." "Instructor Emo, are you all right?" Emosher nodded and said, "I'm fine." Then, with a thought, 6 bubble-like spaces appeared around him. There was a cluster of energy flashing in each space. Emosher said to the 4th-grade super-evolved dragons, You guys have worked hard to protect me for the past 8 years. Take these things back and study them yourself. As for how much you can improve, that will depend on your own luck." The 6 4th-grade super-evolved dragons were overjoyed when they heard this. They quickly knelt on the ground. "Thank you, Instructor Emo." "Thank you, Instructor Emo." Emosher did not say much. "Go back." The 6 super-evolved dragons quickly got up and reached out to touch the empty cannons. However, the moment they touched the empty cannons, they popped and disappeared like soap bubbles. The cluster of light in the empty cannons entered their bodies through their fingers. Some cultivation methods instantly appeared in their minds. At the same time, they realized that the cluster of light was actually a cluster of energy. This energy could be turned into an energy weapon according to the strength of the user's body, the degree of use, and the cultivation method. This energy weapon was more powerful than any other weapon in the world. This made the 6 of them overjoyed. They quickly followed embark and left. The government soldiers looked at each other when they saw this. They found the treasure? They found the treasure in such a short time? Moreover, it seems to be some sort of incredible treasure. They said that there was nothing inside, but I managed to find some incredible treasure in less than 10 minutes. Moreover, I gave one to each of the 6 of them. The government soldiers were all green with envy. However, they could only be green with envy. There was nothing they could do about it. However, there was a saying that there was no such thing as an impenetrable wall. News of this would soon spread throughout the South Light Star region. In truth, it wasn't that embark wasn't being cautious. Rather, there was no need for embark to be cautious now. I'm already invincible. Is there something wrong with my head if I'm still so cautious? Embark then led the others to Cloud Sea Planet. Cloud Sea Planet was now under the rule of Konghai. The country was peaceful and prosperous. Over the past 8 years, Cloud Sea Planet had not experienced any war. Cloud Sea Planet had changed greatly compared to 8 years ago. However, Konghai was still brooding over the fact that his instructor Mo would never return. Chapter 659. Even though Cloud Sea Planet was at peace and all industries were developing in an orderly manner, Konghai still had one great regret in his heart. His instructor Mo would never return. It had been 8 years. There had been no news of him in these 8 years. Even as optimistic as he was, he didn't think embark could return. Meanwhile, embark students at Cloud Sea Academy were all heartbroken. Their instructor Mo had left just like that. He hadn't even left behind a single word. In these 8 years they had all graduated from Cloud Sea Academy and entered various industries in society. However, they would often think of embark in their free time. They would think of embark's teachings and the various 9 dragon transformations that embark had taught them. It was these 9 dragon transformations that made their abilities far more outstanding than the other dragons. It also made their status in society much higher than the other dragons. It also caused their gratitude and nostalgia for embark to grow stronger and stronger. What saddened them the most was the fact that such a mentor would never come back. It was under such circumstances that embark brought the 6 4th grade super evolved dragons back to Cloud Sea Planet. Embark didn't go to Konghai's residence. Instead, he went straight to the lakeside villa. It had been 8 years, but Lei Rin was still living in the lakeside villa. Embark scanned the place with his dragon soul and found that everything in the room he used to live in was still in its original state. It seemed like Lei Rin was quite considerate. He scanned the place again with his dragon soul and found that Lei Rin was still in Cloud Sea Academy. Lei Rin had now become an assistant instructor at Cloud Sea Academy. It hadn't even been 10 years since he had joined the academy. It was already impressive for other students to advance from 1st grade to 2nd grade in 10 years. However, he had become an assistant instructor in a single leap. It was all because of embark's teachings. However, he would often think of embark in his free time just like the other students. Moreover, he thought of embark far more often than the other students. After all, he lived with embark every day. Moreover, he and embark were both friends and teacher. Their relationship was much deeper than that of the other students. At this moment, the 6 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons had gone to the Star-Lord's residence. One could only imagine how shocked and delighted Konghai was when he saw them. Before the 4th grade ultra-evolved dragons could say anything, Konghai's first words were, "It's great that all of you are back." The second sentence was, "Where's Instructor Mo?" Since these people had returned, Instructor Mo would definitely return as well. When Konghai heard that Instructor Mo had returned to the lakeside villa, he immediately dropped everything he was doing and rushed to the lakeside villa. When he saw embark, Konghai could not help but tear up. He had fought on the battlefield 10 times and never shed a single tear. When she saw embark return, her eyes were already wet. He repeatedly invited embark to stay in his Star-Lord mansion, saying that the conditions there were much better than here. However, embark was used to staying here and was not willing to move. Besides, embark knew that since he had just returned, there would definitely be many people coming over. For example, the instructors of the academy and his students. If he moved to the Star-Lord mansion, it would be inconvenient for them to move over. When Konghai saw that embark was unwilling to move out, he decided not to force him. Over the next few days, just as Emoshur had expected, it was not just the instructors and students of the academy who came to visit Emoshur. Even some of the other forces on Cloud Sea planet sent people to visit him. In the past, Emoshur would have preferred peace and quiet. With so many people coming and going, it made him very uncomfortable. However, he had stayed in the Forest of Stars for 8 years, and he had not seen many people in these 8 years. Now that he could see so many people, his mood was much better. At the same time, news of Emoshur obtaining a treasure from the depths of space spread throughout the entire South Bright Star region. Moreover, the news spread with great detail. Some even knew that Emoshur did not obtain any treasure, but the ancestral dragon's legacy. Emoshur found it strange that they knew so much. Apart from the 6 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons, no one else knew that he had obtained the ancestral dragon's legacy. How did they know? Emoshur scanned the area with his dragon soul. Now, his dragon soul was tens of thousands of times stronger than his dragon's will. With a simple sweep of his dragon soul, he could steal the memories of everyone in Cloud Sea City. However, he only stole the memories of the 6 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons. Through the memories of these 6 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons, he knew that it was one of the 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragons who had leaked the news. That ultra-evolved dragon told his son about the legacy. His son then told his friends about it, and the news spread like wildfire. If it was in the past, Emoshur would have fled far, far away at this moment. However, the current Emoshur did not need to care about such things. He had already reached the realm of the ancestral dragon. Why would he care about these ordinary dragons? He continued to live his life as usual. The next day, the 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragon who had leaked the news brought his son over. He kicked his son, causing him to kneel in front of Emoshur. "Instructor Emo, it is my own fault for telling him about the ancestral dragon's legacy. I didn't expect him to tell his friends about it while he was drinking. That's why the news spread and brought great danger to you. Please punish me, Instructor Emo." The 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragon's son also knew that he had caused great trouble. He knelt on the ground and trembled, not daring to say a single word. If it were 8 years ago, Emoshur would have killed this 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragon's son. However, the current Emoshur did not need to do so. He waved his hand and said to the 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragon, "You don't have to worry about that. There is nothing in the Myriad Dragon Star region that can hurt me now. However, your son needs to be taught a lesson. He will probably cause a lot of trouble in the future if he continues like this." The 4th-grade ultra-evolved dragon let out a sigh of relief when he heard this. He had thought that Emoshur would severely punish his useless son. If the punishment was severe, he might even kill his son. Even though he knew that it was his useless son who had caused this trouble, as a father, how could he not feel sorry for his son? After all, he only had this one son. Now that Emoshur had no intention of punishing him, he was naturally very grateful to Emoshur. "Don't worry, Instructor Emo. When I return, I will lock him up for 3 years according to the family rules." At the same time, the many forces in the South Bright Star region heard that Emoshur had obtained the ancestral dragon's legacy. They were all eager to make a move. At the same time, Konghai heard of this news and quickly sent people to investigate. At the same time, he set up defenses around Cloud Sea Planet to prevent those forces from attacking. Chapter 660. It had to be said that Konghai had great foresight. On the 3rd day after he strengthened the defenses around the planet, 3 forces arrived at the outskirts of planet Cloud Sea. According to the scouts that Konghai sent out, there were more than 3 forces heading this way. There were more than a dozen forces behind them, and they were all the top forces in the Southern Dark Star region. Planet Cloud Sea was the most remote planet in the Southern Dark Star region. In the past, these forces would not even look at planet Cloud Sea. Now they were all heading here. Their goal was obvious. Konghai suddenly felt a little nervous. Even though he had been through many battles, big and small, and participated in no less than 10 battles, he had never encountered such a powerful enemy. Who were these forces? Sirius, Endless, Amaterasu. Sirius, Endless, and Amaterasu were the 3 most powerful planets in the Southern Dark Star region. Of course, the officials of these 3 planets would not directly send people over. However, they would not stop the 3 forces from coming over to fight for the inheritance. The force on Sirius was called the Sirius Gang. The force on Endless was called the Endless Blades, an assassin organization. The force on Amaterasu was called the Amaterasu Association. The Sirius Gang, Endless Blades, and the Amaterasu Association were the 3 most powerful forces in the Southern Dark Star region. They had branches all over the southern Darkstar region. However, planet Cloud C was too remote, so they did not bother to set up a branch here. When Kong Hai found out about this, he quickly gathered the officials for a discussion. However, after a long discussion, they did not come up with anything. After all, the enemy was too strong. It was said that the Sirius Gang, Endless Blades, and Amaterasu Association all had Class 8 Super Evolved Dragons. Due to the importance of this mission, even if they did not send out Class 8 dragons, they would at least be Class 7. Moreover, there was more than one of them. Against such a powerful opponent, how could a small planet like Planet Cloud C defend itself? At this time, someone suggested that they look for Instructor Mo Shi. Kong Hai nodded. In fact, the first person he thought of was Mo Shi. However, he did not want to trouble Mo Shi with every matter, so he could not find a way to discuss it with the officials. However, it seemed that he could only look for Mo Shi now. Kong Hai personally came to Mo Shi's lakeside villa and told him about the current situation. Mo Shi didn't think much of it. Remove the defense and let them come over. Mo Shi only said these few words. He didn't say much else, but these few words reassured Kong Hai. He knew that Instructor Mo never fought an unprepared battle. Since Instructor Mo had asked them to come over, he must have a plan. Yes, Instructor Mo. I'll do it right away. Therefore, when those forces arrived at Cloud C Planet, they discovered that Cloud C Planet was completely defenseless. The vice president of Amaterasu Association laughed. He looked at the two leaders of the Heavenly Wolf Gang and Endless Battle Blade. The two of them also had smiles on their faces. They all had a tacit understanding. The way they saw it, Cloud C Planet knew that it couldn't withstand their attacks, so it had given up. Thus, the three of them ordered the gang members behind them to head straight into Cloud C Planet. The Heavenly Wolf sect had 10,000 members. Endless Blade had 8,000 players. Amaterasu organization had 10,000 members. They all headed into Cloud C Planet. Behind them, more than a dozen other forces also followed in. Even though it was impossible for them to get anything from these three forces, but what if? If the three forces ate meat, they should at least get some soup. They quickly arrived in the sky above Cloud C City. Just like the heavenly soldiers in Journey to the West, they didn't land on the ground at all. They just floated in the air above the city. The citizens of Cloud C City couldn't help but panic when they saw so many people flying over. What's going on? Is there going to be a war? Why didn't we hear anything about it? Damn, that's the Heavenly Wolf Gang. I saw their uniforms. And that's the Endless Battle Blade Gang and Amaterasu Association. All three forces are here. What's going on? What's going on? And there are over a dozen other forces behind them? I know. Didn't they say that someone on Cloud C Planet obtained the Ancestral Dragon's inheritance? Are they here to steal it? The matter of the Ancestral Dragon's inheritance had caused a huge uproar. The entire internet knew about it, so it was impossible for the citizens to not know about it. Why should the people of our planet give the Ancestral Dragon's inheritance to them? How shameless. Keep your voice down. You're finished if they hear you. In my opinion, we can't protect the Ancestral Dragon's inheritance at all. It's better to just hand it over to them. Even though they're shameless, there's nothing we can do. All rules are laughable in the face of strength. Just as the citizens were discussing, the vice president of the Amaterasu Association spoke. Planet Lord Cloud C, hand over the Ancestral Dragon's inheritance. Kong Hai had known about it a long time ago. He cursed in his heart. These bastards were 2F** King shameless. They'd agreed that anything found in the Star Ocean or Star Forest would belong to whoever found it. Now these fellows were trying to take it from him. He condensed energy wings and flew up with over 100 guards. He faced the tens of thousands of people from the other forces. You're not following the rules. Kong Hai spoke as he glanced at the lakeside villa. Aha, rules? The vice president of the Celestial Empire stroked his beard with a trace of ridicule in his eyes. We're all adults. Don't talk about rules and fairy tales. Rules are for the weak. The vice leader of the Celestial Wolf Gang spoke, hand over the Ancestral Dragon's inheritance or die. At this moment, a few rank 6 super evolved dragons of the Endless Blade flashed and instantly appeared by Kong Hai's side. One on the left, one on the right, one on the front and one on the back. They surrounded Kong Hai. The endless war blades in their hands were already pressed against Kong Hai's head and heart. This was the method of the Endless Blade. When they wanted to kill you, there was nothing you could do. The vice president of the Endless Blade only spoke 5 words, are you going to hand it over or not? In the face of such an enemy, the hundreds of guards around Kong Hai could not protect him at all. As for the citizens of Cloud Sea City, all of them had terrified expressions on their faces. There were even some cowardly ones who had collapsed to the ground. It's over. It's over. Cloud Sea Star is finished. If we don't hand over the ancestral dragon's inheritance, Cloud Sea Star will really be finished. However, right at this moment, a scene that shocked everyone happened. The arms of the 4 assassins who were pressing the endless blade against Kong Hai suddenly melted like blood coming into contact with fire. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.